No ID is meant for a sane audience. No ID may contain liberty-oriented content. Pinko discretion is advised. Now, here's No ID with Paul Banducci and Scott Moskowitz.
The man is right. This is No ID. Inaugural episode.
First one.
We're going to cover North Idaho on this show. Hyper-local, it seems to be the way.
For now.
There's enough nationally syndicated programming. There's enough stuff covering, Trump. I figure there's plenty of room for local shows because those seem to have gone the way of, I don't know. Everything just seems to be running national programming or a syndicated morning show. A lot of the stuff that used to cover your hometown seems to have gone away, or at least if it does cover your hometown, it seems to be pulled by the same string. It's like, well, it's an NBC affiliate. Yeah, okay. So is it really covering your local, you know what I'm saying?
And there's plenty of rage bait at the national level. And unfortunately, even the local papers tend to follow the mainstream media, so we're hoping to present an alternative.
That's the idea. So who are we? Well, I'm Scott, and that's Paul.
Hello.
And since Paul is the North Idaho, the true local, and has the real credibility, let's be honest about it, I figured let's start by telling people who you are.
I guess I'm close enough to a true local. Technically, I was born at Fairchild Air Force Base, but my dad was Air Force. What are you going to do? But raised in the Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene area. Grew up here and have been here long enough to see Coeur d'Alene go from a quiet little town that I remember to a major tourist attraction. Growth that was hard to imagine even 10 years ago. So a lot of change, some good, some bad. As far as the politics side of it goes, the same fight's been brewing for probably 15 years. And there's nothing nastier than small town politics. We're going to cover some of that.
Well, as we've discussed plenty, it's a microcosm of national politics. I mean, like the tactics are familiar. The storylines are familiar. They just maybe involve different names and a couple of less zeros. True. But otherwise, I recognize everything I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. I think the one small difference may be that when people come here, especially if they're not from here, they expect it to look a little different. They come here and they think it's going to be, deep red conservative, through and through, true and true. But there's a pretty hard battle being fought here for the heart and soul of the area, just like a lot of other places. So it's not quite as quote unquote safe as people think it is. And that surprises folks.
Well, who's winning? It's hard for me to tell.
Who's winning?
Because when I talk to the boots on the ground, at Post Falls Brewing Company, it seems like the people are winning because there's just so many more of them. Mm. At least it seems like that. Maybe it's a self-selecting crowd that I find myself talking to. I don't know. Maybe I'm not sipping, at the right bougie coffee shop, and maybe I might meet a different clientele. But then if you tune into the, if you read the local wiper, it does seem like the cartel might be winning. I can't. Who's winning?
It is definitely a matter of perspective, who you talk to, who you know, and what you know. I'd say it's a pretty heavy seesaw battle overall. In the last 10, 15 years, I'd say the conservative libertarian side of the equation has gained a little bit of ground and held some of it, but it is a very hard-fought battle. The other side, I'm just going to say the leftist side is kind of a catch-all. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of money. They're concentrated, of course, in the urban areas, particularly, downtown Coeur d'Alene, downtown Post Falls, a lot of them in Hayden. They have the influence.
Give me a breakdown of your professional background.
So for the last 12 years, I was the owner and operator of a cigar shop and lounge, first called Bulldog Pipe and Cigar, and it was in the Silver Lake Mall in Coeur d'Alene. That was the first iteration. That wrapped up the end of 2020. In the middle of 2021, we got the second iteration up and rolling, and that was the Racketeer Cigar Lounge, and we moved that to Post Falls. And it was a full cocktail bar and cigar lounge, and really cool place. Very unique place to get away and have a cigar and have a drink and do community things. Talk about. In fact, that was the joke. If you're not talking about religion and politics in there, we were like, we don't care about the weather and sports. We care about all the other stuff. So we were the only bar in town where we actually encouraged those things.
Well, for all the times in life you get told like, this is not the place for it, man. Well, where is the place for it?
The Racketeer
Cigar Lounge. Yeah.
And I just recently sold it in April to a friend and colleague and kind of like a little brother, Nathan Eric Kelly, and he's running it now, and I'm in between things.
There's a reason that you called it the Racketeer, And perhaps we can get into that on a future show.
That's definitely a podcast all on its own.
Sure. Okay, fair enough, because we have some other stuff that we're going to cover on this show, which we'll get to in this inaugural show, which we'll get to in a moment. And who am I and why am I here? Well, I come from the People's Republic of California.
A refugee. We call you a refugee.
I am the quintessential political refugee that y'all have been, reading. You see how I said y'all? I'm trying to that
blending in.
I'm archetypal of who came here in 2020. I guess between like 2020 and 2022, that most recent massive influx. It isn't the first one. It's just the most recent one and maybe the most virulent as far as why we were coming here. But I'm that guy, where I just things were sort of going downhill in California. They have been for a long time. I also was in retail hospitality. I had founded a craft beer bar that I was running down there. I come from a background of broadcast as well. We did media surrounding craft beer and home brewing. So basically everything that I was doing was the rug was pulled out and the life became untenable in California in the most literal sense, not philosophical. I was being prevented from living. Every part of my life that I enjoyed was gone.
2020 California, not a pretty place to be.
No, it wasn't. And so my wife and I thought, well, where is a pretty place to be? And the decision sort of made itself. We initially, sort of spun a globe, and then we're like, maybe we'll tour this area, we'll tour that area. But my wife has family in Spokane. They were not happy that they were on that side of the border at that time, and they still aren't. But eventually we were like, well, I guess why are we looking at, random places in Arizona and Utah when North Idaho just sort of seems to be an obvious fit? And I can't imagine having picked anywhere else now that we're 5 years on. So I'm here to try and create whatever environment is needed to keep it the place that we came to. Well, why did we come here? Well, that reason is what I wish to preserve, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. But.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the most recent wave of refugees have been the most politically active. Migration to North Idaho has been since the 70s. In fact, even then, when my father and my mother's families moved, both from California, in the 70s, so brought my mom and my dad up when they were kids. I can't see what that is.
Our guest today is drawing with his index finger on the desk.
Came up in the 60s.
In the 60s, excuse me, the 60s.
Were you writing 60s with your index finger?
Yeah, 60s, yes.
Got it. In the studio with us today is Paul's father, Todd Banducci, and we're going to get into the fracas. I was trying to figure out what terms to search. The kerfuffle, the North Idaho College fracas. I couldn't quite figure out exactly what to call it, but we're going to break down the last. I mean, you've been in the chair since 2012, so really the last few years is going to be the focus. But I get the sense that it's actually a much longer timeline than just the 2020 through 2022.
Yeah. So basically, my dad, Todd Banducci, he was an NIC trustee. What Scott and I are attempting to do here is set the backdrop, which we haven't fully done yet, but we set the backdrop of North Idaho politics, and then the NIC soiree or ordeal or catastrophe or whatever word.
Soiree sounds too good. I want to go to a soiree.
It depends on your perspective again, right? It depends on your perspective. Is a perfect illustration of how North Idaho politics have played out over the last 10 to 12 years. So,
Can I make one comment?
Absolutely.
About the migration up here.
Go right ahead.
And our family started looking in the 60s. Paul's mother's family started looking up here in the 60s, moved here in the late 60s. So this has been going on for a long time. But what's interesting is the recent migration is a little bit different. Back when we've had a couple of our former mayors, Mayor Bloom for one, a lot of these rich and fancy people came up and wanted to be part of the great metropolitan, area of Coeur d'Alene, and they were embraced. And everybody wanted to be part of the country club crowd, and be part of that. Make Coeur d'Alene like, Lake Tahoe or California or whatever. And they embraced all that, and it was all the beautiful people, and they all kumbaya and get along. And everybody politically was kind of benign in some ways, and they all got along. And the power structure and the people in power, money, and control able to withhold exactly their positions in downtown Coeur d'Alene, and the people that have been the families that have controlled this town forever. What's interesting, though, is this latest migration of people that are coming up and digging in, doing their research, and they don't want this place to become like what they came from. And so those are the people that these other folks are criticizing and calling out in the Coeur d'Alene press and these other places, saying how bad they are, these Californians, And the irony of it is many of these people are the good Californians. They're the ones that they are conservative. They have the value system, and they want this place to not turn into what they came from. So they are fighting. And so it's ironic how they're being criticized and misrepresented as being the problem, when it's some of these other entrenched people that are holding on real tight. And these new people are going, whoa, it's not as red as we were told. It's not as conservative. This isn't what we expected, but we've got to fight to keep this to what we thought we came to, and want. This is why we came here. This is why we uprooted our families and moved and changed careers or whatever was involved with that. Moving from a California to an Idaho, 1,000 miles or more, depending on what part of California you came from, that is not a simple thing. So it's interesting to watch how now some of these people are really mad at some of the new people, because the new people are fighting, and they're not just up here to take pictures and go along with this. And it's interesting how that has evolved.
I had a conversation over the bar at the former Selkirk Abbey Brewery back in, I think it was when we had first moved here, maybe 2021 or so. And the fellow who I was talking to was saying, because I was describing I'd come from, the land down under. And he was like, oh, well, this is, there's been many waves. He was like, he was an old local. He was like, man, I remember sometime in the early 90s, there was some travel magazine, something or other article, like, the top 10 undiscovered gems or something thereabouts. And that Coeur d'Alene was featured prominently. And there was this huge wave of people from California. So, of course, I busted out my, my smartphone there and looked, I wonder what he was talking about. And June 1991, the Los Angeles Times archive, all the newspapers are every single, issue is archived. And there it is from the travel section. It's like a screenshot. It looks like the actual newspaper from that top, just like he's describing, top 10 undiscovered gems. And I think Coeur d'Alene was number 1 or 2. And as I was reading it, I was like, this is paid placement. I bet you Hagadone placed this, because and to your point, I think he's soliciting the type of person you were describing. The country club said, hey, come here. We'll form a new country club up here in North Idaho.
It's exactly what they were doing. They were marketing this place nationally, and to certain places, California, Texas, wherever. And that's exactly what they're doing. And those downtown folks, the chamber down there, it was to their benefit, and Hagadone just happens to be kind of the umbrella under which, most people think everything falls. But you look at the folks and who prospered and were most advantaged by all this. And it's a small group of people that really, and it's funny how you look at the builders and the realtors and how some of the people are all on board with all this, because they've helped sell out North Idaho, help build it out, get rid of the prairie, get rid of the green space, and who's made the money and from this influx, and who's most benefited from it. It's really interesting to watch. The average person here has not benefited from it. And in fact, the average young person has been priced out from being able to buy a home. Which and the job at the service industry, the jobs aren't great.
I'm sort of guilty of being that, I took my California money here and business sale and home sale and this sort of thing. And I don't like having contributed to what you're describing, but I also don't really know what my choice was. I know you're not condemning me or anything, but I think about that. But I just don't know what the answer is. And there's something sort of insidious about that solicitation we were describing from that LA Times placement, because it wasn't like, where you see the little fine print, this is an advertisement. It wasn't, that was not what it was. If you're reading which I might have been. I mean, I read the LA Times when I was a kid. I would read the sports and the comics, I mean, for all I know, I thumbed through that travel section when I was freaking 11 years old. But I was obviously people were less sophisticated then. They weren't thinking about that sort of thing. It just seemed like an article in the travel section, but it wasn't.
It speaks to the fact that it's not a recent phenomenon, the migration up here. It's been going on for decades, and it comes in waves. And each wave has been slightly unique in one way or another. And what's interesting is when I was in middle school and high school, I know there's always been animus towards the people who moved in from the people who are now here. And oftentimes the animus is from people who had just moved here, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I already feel that way
it's
too.
It's funny how that works.
Like someone saw our logo and our name of our show, No ID. I've been bouncing it off of people like, hey, what do you does this branding work? Well, what does it evoke? And I've had a couple of people be like, oh, I see it as No Idaho. Like, don't No Idaho. I'm like, yeah, good, No Idaho.
Don't come here.
Yeah, don't come here. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I suppose there's definitely an undercurrent of that around here, from locals and newcomers alike. There used to be a joke about that. I think it still holds, where people get here, They take a deep breath, they turn around, and they go, "Don't come here."
Exactly.
After they get here.
Pull up the ladder, man. Just pull
Yeah.
up that ladder behind me.
And we see that even in housing policy and planning and zoning policy. And I mean, you want to talk about the housing crisis. That's a manufactured crisis where we just don't build enough housing. It's just simple supply. We haven't built enough. We haven't built it fast enough. And right now in Rathdrum, in fact, I sent this article to you. Well, this will be another podcast later, but it's this simple. People who just moved here live in new developments. Then a new development is about to go in next to them. And what do? They throw a fit about it.
NIMBY.
They go to NIMBY, not in my backyard. Yeah, they go to City Hall, they protest the new development, and I look at most of them and I go, most of you weren't here 5 years ago.
Well, exactly.
And they complain about, services will be overloaded and the prairie is going away and, it's not the small town it used to be. And I go, no, it's not, and it can't be anymore. You can't limit the growth. If you do, you price your kids out of this place.
It's like when you're on the road, you are going the exact correct speed. Anybody going slower than you is an idiot, and anybody going faster than you is a maniac. I have the correct speed. The development that was happening when I moved here was just the right spot, and anything further is just we're just gonna live in a North Korean style 26-story high rises, and we're all gonna have apartments. Is that it?
Well, it's easy to be anti-growth when you've got yours, but it's a very short-sighted policy because again, your kids, our kids, are going to have a real affordability issue to live here. So anyways, but that's another topic. As far as setting the backdrop goes, this all plays into it. Each wave of migrant has brought, immigration, so to speak, I use that term lightly here, has brought different challenges and different people. And the latest one has brought more conservative Californians. COVID definitely did that. It was a political shift. People realized places that were far less free, places that were relatively speaking more free, and people moved to their preferred places. And Idaho, North Idaho happened to be one of those spots that if you were more freedom-minded, a lot of people wanted to be here. So, that makes everything more expensive. Housing obviously is harder to get, and everybody coming in tends to have a little more money. That's a contributing factor, but it's not the only factor. But it is interesting, back to the press. When I was a kid, the press used to run articles in support of the influx of Californians because there was animus against Californians even then. And the press was very much about them. But that's because the wave in the late 90s, early 2000s was a much more leftist-leaning wave of Californians. The most recent wave is not. And so now you don't see those kinds of articles from the press. Instead, you see the opposite, which is like, you're not from here. You shouldn't be allowed to have a voice. But that's because the voice directly opposes what the press and the downtown Coeur d'Alene cartel supports.
Well, that was the athletes, the actors, actresses. That's how we get, places like Black Rock and some of the other gated communities that are on both sides of the lake.
Black Rock and Gaza Ranch are basically just doing what Hagadone did early on. They're just extensions of the same strategies.
But even a place like Arrow Point that used to be very casual and cabiny, and the locals could go over there. I mean, if you look at the transformation from when I was young to where it is now, it's just amazing the amount of money and the influx.
At face value, and here's where it's hard to remember because it's, again, as locals, it can be really hard to remember. But at face value, that change isn't an unethical or an immoral thing. It feels like it is. It's just a byproduct of living in a place that everybody else wants to live.
Right.
It's a highly sought after place to live. Do I love seeing places where I used to hunt grouse and play paintball turn into houses for rich people from out of town? Nah, I don't love it.
When you put it like that.
But there's also a lot of opportunity that comes with that. More population means more business growth. The velocity of money gets higher. The more people there are, there's a lot more opportunity. There's pros and cons. And ultimately, as much as I'd like to see things not change, if you adopt anti-growth policies, all you do is price out the next generation.
Yep.
So anyways, that wasn't actually what we were here to talk about.
It's okay. Well, we're here to talk about everything as it relates to North Idaho. And that's the thing too, is there is no such thing as things staying the same. No. Places are either in decline or they're growing. There's no such thing as status.
There is no Mayberry. I mean, there's places that are close, but there is no, Mayberry town where it's this way. It always will be this way, and it's amazing, and it will stay amazing. It's just not how life works.
Before we transition into the next part of this show, I just want to make one quick clarification because I'm a big language guy. Precision in language is like huge for me, and I know it is for you too.
Yes, very much so.
And so I want to quickly clarify that COVID did not make me leave California. The state made me leave California, and this is you're the last person that needs to have that clarification made. But I've made this point in my life to people because I don't ever want to describe COVID as having done anything, because I look at it like saying it would be like if you were like, Yeah, well, unfortunately, the destruction of Berlin in 1944 was on account of the Jewish problem. Like, no, that's just what the government blamed for its totalitarianism. So you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So when you're like, well, COVID did this and COVID did that, I in my head, I hear it as like the Jewish problem did this and the Jewish problem did that. I don't want to let the government off the hook for acting totalitarian. Whatever it is they blamed, the blame du jour is just state totalitarianism, and that's what caused me to go. And I know you know that, but I'm just clarifying that that's not something that you'll ever hear come out of my mouth on this show or anywhere else. COVID didn't do anything to your life or anyone else's life or your business or your this or your that. COVID is an inanimate, it's just a thing.
The government did all that.
There you go.
We can't forget, never forget. That most of us were called non-essential.
Oh, right.
I will never, ever forget that. My business was shut down for 5 months, which compared to a lot of places wasn't very long. But for Idaho, even people think that Idaho didn't have shutdowns. They think that Idaho just sailed along. That's not true.
No, it's not true.
Idaho handled COVID similar to a lot of other places. They just didn't do it quite as harshly or quite as long. But it still was a thing, and it affected a lot of people.
Yes, because the nature of the state is basically the same everywhere, and it will get away with whatever level of totalitarianism the boots on the ground allow it to. And that was the real difference.
Correct.
Was here in Idaho, there were just way more people that weren't down with being treated that way. So like the Selkirk Abbey that I just mentioned earlier, the God rest its soul, it is no more, but
Alas.
when it was operating, it continued operating in defiance of being told to shut down. And basically the owner, who has become a friend, I consider him a hero for having done this, like, just said, this is a private business. Like, you don't have the right to tell me to close my doors. Go away. And my understanding is that the mayor of Post Falls, who had been in several times, just to drink beer like a normal person in the pre-2020 times, came in and was like, hey, Panhandle Health is breathing down my neck, Jeff Whitman, the owner, you got to close. And Jeff said, leave, and if you come back, bring an army. And he just didn't close his doors, and guess what happened? Nothing. Because the entire thing was phony baloney. There were no enforcement mechanisms except for some, they padlocked this door, they made your life extremely difficult or this or that, like some highly publicized enforcement mechanisms. But the truth is it was really all just phony baloney.
They did do some things. It also helps. It also helps to know people. I mean, knowing the mayor helps, even if you're not the best of friends. It still helps insulate you a little bit. There are some stories. I mean,
I don't want to speak out of turn. You might have experienced stuff that I don't know about.
Well, this will be for another podcast. But there's a story of this is a high profile one for around here. The Rathrum couple that got arrested for having a garage sale. They had to have a fire sale and a estate sale because the husband's father had died, had a bunch of stuff. They had to move it. So they had a 3-day garage sale, and Rathrum PD shows up and warns them, I guess, 5 or 6 times. But each time the couple goes, hey, we don't have a choice. We're trying to get, we got to do something about all of this. This is the best thing we've got. And they were arrested for that. So now there was a lot of outcry in the community, and ultimately they were not charged. But without that outcry, the machinations of the legal system would have churned forward, and that couple would have been indicted and charged with COVID violations.
But it was just so arbitrary, though. They will close your church.
Oh yeah.
They will close your business. They will arrest you at your garage sale. But yet, like me, I was in the insurance and financial industries. I was deemed essential, so I stayed open.
Must be
and
nice.
Just plugged right along. Met with clients and just kept doing everything I needed to do. You know, so
when the state closed,
so obviously I must have been that much safer than the rest of you.
Well, your air wasn't dangerous.
Yeah. Well, let's not even get to that about the masks and the.
Man, we're gonna get into it.
I mean, the whole follow the science while we're at it.
Well, the state closed my my place of business, which is labeled the Tavern, because we had a beer and wine license at the time. They closed us down. In fact, bars were the first wave to close and the last wave to open. Of course, thanks Mormons in South Idaho. That was a big. But you know what they didn't close? The liquor stores.
Yeah, or the pot dispensaries.
Well, that was Washington.
In Washington, yeah.
But the state of Idaho made sure to, and they did very, very well during the COVID years.
Yes, they did.
Liquor stores, because everybody didn't know what else to do, and they had their stimulus checks, and they're stuck inside, so it's time to drink. Well, so the state of Idaho made out like bandits. Meanwhile, they try to close us down and call us non-essential. So, yeah. Anyways, and then if you want to talk about how arbitrary boundaries are, if you went 90 feet to the west, pot stores were open, abortion clinics were open, but churches were closed. Mm-hmm. You crossed into Idaho, and bars are closed, but liquor stores are open. Churches are allowed to open for the most part, but they'll throw your ass in jail if you're caught smoking a joint. So, sure. invisible arbitrary borders.
Yeah.
Explain that one to me. Anyways, that's another podcast.
It sounds like a libertarian argument being made here.
Government makes no sense.
It all makes sense. And that's, again, with the linguistic precision thing, it drives me crazy because I still hear it's constant because that's the same thing with COVID did this, COVID did that. It's sort of not really your fault because the propaganda has been so frequent and ubiquitous that's how everybody talks. And we're going to get into that in a second here with regard to some of these sources that have covered the North Idaho scandal and COVID did this and the pandemic did that and everybody does it.
And this isn't for a week or two over just the stories as I was still serving in the military over at Fairchild Air Force Base. And I didn't finish out there till 30th November of 22. So that was a couple, 3 years there of COVID and Biden and stuff I was serving. And well, I could share a lot of stories about how that all went. It was rather interesting. And some of the things it was interesting,
So should we just get a third mic straight away and do three hosts?
So when he re-upped to get back in, I even asked him, I was like, what are you doing, Dad? You're doing great in the private sector.
Well, I was asked.
And you're not going to love the military the way it is now. It's not your military. But this is a conversation for another time.
Sure.
So we're setting the backdrop. Basically, up here locally, it's a surprise to people who are new here. They think it tends to be more blood red, more deep conservative, when really there is a battle for the heart and soul of the area. You kind of have your typical urban versus rural versus suburban type situation where urban Coeur d'Alene, it leans pretty left and pretty blue. Suburban Coeur d'Alene can sway one way or the other depending on who's doing the talking and who's doing the listening. And rural Kootenai County tends to be pretty deep blood red. But Coeur d'Alene tends to be the power source. So
you're better off the further you get away from downtown.
Yeah. Well, as a local, I agree. We avoid downtown like the plague because it just isn't for locals anymore, unless you're one of the powerful, moneyed part of the cartel locals.
There was a plague there. I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago there was a plague. Unless you were Walmart or CVS or Costco or Target or Walgreens or Amazon or your insurance agency, but otherwise there was a plague. So it would make sense that you would avoid it.
Yeah. Well, I still avoid it like that. Crazy place. So that surprises people, and that's kind of the backdrop. You have more of a fight on your hands than most people think. And there's one side that has a lot of power and control and resources and money, and a lot of it is from out of state as well. They're well entrenched. They're well established. They do an excellent job of controlling the narrative. They have the press, of course, in their back pocket. That's a given. They always do. That's the mainstream sources. And then on the other side, you have I would call it a coalition, kind of a scraggy, shaggy, scrappy coalition of anywhere from Protestants and Catholics and libertarians and conservatives to MAGA types to everything in between. And the coalition at times is very strong, and at other times they're kind of at each other's throats, which also is a disadvantage because the folks on the left, they tend to move in lockstep. They always have, they always do. The folks opposing are fighting each other as much or more as they're fighting the quote-unquote enemy. So that's another challenge within a challenge. But in general, that would be the backdrop of North Idaho, and there's a lot going on. It's nuanced. It's more complex than you might think. It's not as straightforward as you might think, and things can change on a dime. And like I said, I let out with this, but there's nothing nastier than small town politics, and Coeur d'Alene is an awesome place to see that on display. So that's where we brought in my dad here, who was an NIC trustee for 12 years, and the NIC ordeal.
Which is North Idaho College.
North Idaho
in case
College.
You don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. We're
going to deconstruct that saga, or at least the most recent few years of it. But before we do, I kind of want to describe the structure of this show with regard to the participation of you, the producers. The people who listen to this show, we do not intend to think of you as listeners. You're producers. You help produce this show just like we do. So that means contributing back to the show with your time, your talent, or your treasure. That's our model. We will not have sponsors on this show. I come from the traditional background of broadcast, which is have an audience and then Clorox pays to talk to that audience during commercial breaks. Not on this show.
I can't wait to be sponsored by ivermectin.
Horse dewormer? This is inspired by Adam Curry and John Dvorak from the podcast No Agenda that has been run for almost 20 years. And those guys sort of pioneered this particular model when it comes to broadcast. The whole time they've been broadcasting, they have never had a sponsor. They just directly have their producers participate in the show. So that means submitting show artwork, like, the thumbnail for each episode. That means sending in audio clips of something you heard, some whatever, like I said, we're going to deconstruct media presentations.
Topics you want us to cover.
Exactly.
Send us topics you want us to cover. Headlines, news, or things you've heard, things you've seen. That'll be immensely helpful as well.
Absolutely. And then the time, so that would be the time and the talent portion, and then the treasure portion. Send in a donation. We're just going to ask you directly to donate financially so that we can keep the lights on. And it feels a little weird for me to be soliciting like that because, like I said, I come from a different model. But honestly, I never really thought about how sort of undignified that was. I mean, we were plugging products. I was getting on the mic, and especially in the craft beer broadcasting days, it was like, try this yeast or try this brewery or this homebrew shop, and we weren't using a bunch of the products that we were plugging. They were just sponsors. They were paying for us to plug their stuff. I mean, this is not news to anybody who wasn't born yesterday. I never thought of it as like feeling weird, but looking back on it, it did. This doesn't feel any more or less weird. It's just the reality of it. You want to be compensated for value that we're putting out there, that's what this show is. We're going to try to bring value to North Idaho and then hope that value is returned to us in the form of time, talent, or treasure.
Basically, if you like what we do, throw something at it.
Exactly.
Support the stuff you like. And if not, that's okay too. For me, it's a passion project. If it happens to turn into more than that, then hey, aces. That's pretty sweet. Scott, I think, agrees with me here. My goal is to add value to primarily the political and philosophical scene in North Idaho, maybe through a lens that isn't the press or isn't your traditional avenues.
NoIDshow.com is where you can go to do all of that. And the last thing I'll say is we will, if you want to send in a note along with anything that you send value back to us, we will be happy to read that note on the show. It's noidpod@gmail.com and noidshow.com. With that said, North Idaho College. Mm-hmm. So let's start, I guess, at the beginning when you were first elected. I don't want to go too crazy with sort of far in the past background, but I feel like we should set up where it started. And my understanding was that was 2012.
Yeah, that's correct. And I would suggest to you that the philosophical war had already started at that time. And what you saw was people that had been on the board forever, some of the long-time, almost career trustees, like a Judy Meyer or a Christy Wood, who then stayed on for many, many more years. When I came on, there was a Ken Howard, who's very well known in the community. There had briefly been some folks more what I call conservative/Christian that had been on the board, and they kind of came and went fairly quickly. And so the stage was set to still try to influence NIC in a way that would be more towards the philosophy, I guess, the ideology of the majority of the residents here, instead of being controlled by a small group of people. NIC, just by virtue of its affiliation and location, is really tied into the downtown Coeur d'Alene area and to that group. And it's very homogeneous down there. And the same people that control the foundation at the college, controlled the city of Coeur d'Alene, the downtown, the chamber. It's interesting, the power structure, to watch the movers and shakers. One of the complaints that's been for decades is the emphasis on downtown by the city of Coeur d'Alene and the inequitable amount of money and resources poured into downtown versus the rest of it. East Sherman said, hey, what about us? And Midtown has said, hey, what about us? And a little bit north of that has said, how about us? But the focus has been downtown because that's the power center and the people that own that. I mean, go look at the county tax records sometime and see who owns what properties down there. And, it gives you a quick look and who lives in the Fort Grounds and who lives down in that area, Fernand Village, whatever. It's an interesting thing. As alluded to earlier, that's a real good blue swath. If you look at how Coeur d'Alene votes compared to the other cities, the other precincts in this county, there are now 73 of them, used to be 70. And you can really see where it becomes purple and then really more blue. And so that's the emphasis. And the college was along that lines. And I think people were already tired at that point of what they viewed as indoctrination there. Later we've come up with these terms, CRT, DEI, and some of the stuff's become a little more prevalent and in your face. But a lot of that stuff's been going on for decades in colleges. And NIC was no different than any other college that you would, hear about.
Academia seems to be sort of the same everywhere. So what inspired you to run in 2012 and what made you think you could win?
I actually had a couple folks. One was my father-in-law and another gentleman, a friend of his, that encouraged me aggressively to run. It was not my idea initially. It was not something I had considered or thought about. So I guess I would call myself the reluctant candidate.
It's always charming, by the way. Like, hey, here's the guitar, man. You got to play for us. No, I'm good, dude. No, you got to play for us.
It's actually true, though. He didn't want to do it because he knew what he was getting into. He's like, I don't know about this.
That's what you want.
I basically had to acquiesce to do it. You know, it was one of those, and a small sidebar, not that it matters, but at the very same time, my mother was passing away from cancer. And in fact, on the final day of the filing, that Friday when I was filed and everything, you know, my mom actually passed away the following Wednesday at the hospice house. So I had never run for office before. I had no understanding really of it or experience. I had no funds. So I hit the ground pretty flat-footed. So, you know, the initial campaign expenses were on my credit card, the loans to myself, which was a bit of a shock to my wife, I think, to a degree. And so off we went, you know, the great adventure, really having no idea what we had just undertaken. It was quite a learning experience on the fly.
So how'd you win?
By surprise.
Yeah, actually, it was a bit of a shock to some folks. We outworked them. We caught them flat-footed. We got out ahead of it. I had a couple of people that were helping me, and they understood the system, and they were able to get some things out, some of the mailers and the absentee ballot chasers. And the guy that had been in the position I was running against had been there for 12 years. He was chairman of the board. He's one of the beautiful people in the city. Don't think he'd ever actually run a campaign. You know, most of those people just would get appointed, and then they'd be reelected unopposed. And so, you know, nobody ever rocked the apple cart down there. It was interesting. One of the other guys that ran beside me was Paul Matthews, and he barely lost to Judy Meyer. But the only thing that saved her was they had so much money and resources that they were able to pivot and come at him so hard with the full brunt of all the things they could bring to bear that she was able to just barely beat him. And she was just popular and just enough name recognition that she squeaked out a victory. But the guy I won, I think it was like about 54 to 46, something like that. So I beat him with a solid majority. But I think he was shocked. You know, in fact, it was rumored he might have left even town for a few days after that.
You crawl inside a bottle in a motel somewhere?
I don't know. I
Had to rethink all of his life decisions.
I can't verify that independently, but that was the rumor that he was, you know, upset and surprised. But he was one of the, you know, the paragons of the downtown association, headed one of the large brokerage firms and had a title and been an important person. And ironically, after he lost, it wasn't that much longer thereafter that the governor actually appointed him to the Dormitory Housing Authority.
Oh, wow.
There's a group of beautiful people that got appointed there, which was something that they could do in the governor, but as trustees, we didn't have oversight over them. So it was this interesting thing to suddenly stick that same guy right there, you know, kind of counter to me.
Speaking of side notes, that kind of thing happens a lot in this area. In fact, most recently with the library network and the trustees there. So that's a topic for another time. But a gal who lost and has been appointed recently as a district judge.
It's a nice consolation prize.
Yeah.
Well, like
Isn't that a lifetime appointment too?
The NIC judge,
never
you know,
go
for
away.
one of our big things with the governor's involved and everything, suddenly she was put on the Supreme Court at state Idaho.
This happens all the time.
The appearance of that's really interesting. I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but just the timing and the optics are just quite interesting.
Yeah, if you lean to the left and you're a part of the establishment around here, losing an election is almost the best thing that could happen to you because you're just going to get an appointment to something even better and higher paying.
Failing up.
Or
failing up.
Do what you're supposed to do, I guess, you know. You can be rewarded, I guess, maybe.
It's great to be connected.
Boy, no kidding. How do I become one of these beautiful people? I'm going to build a time machine and go back to 1991 and move to Coeur d'Alene then. Hey, I'm from California.
Oh, man.
And I've got money.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well, first off, you have to sell your soul.
Well,
Or you have no soul.
Oh.
It's interesting. So anyway, it was about NIC and kind of, again, the cronyism and corruption that expands downtown Coeur d'Alene into the NIC works. And, you know, something we talked about earlier, it's like, you know, who controls all the professional contracts that are let out of there? You know, who's doing the work for them for all the different things that they need? It's interesting to see some of the people that were yelling and shouting and involved with some of the stuff in the recent years and what their connections are to the college, and if they have any, you know, connections business-wise. I think that was the whole thing, is these guys saw the college and they thought that I could try to help be there for the students. That was the thing, because I had no agenda. It was just go down there and try to right this ship as best you can for some of the things that we see that really aren't great. And then there was also some issue about some taxation and some of the foregone taxes and some of the things that happened that way that did not sit well with a lot of folks, and the URDs and some of that. And so
a lot of people don't know this, but NIC, North Idaho College, is a taxing entity. In Kootenai County, it's part of your property taxes, and they can take up to 3% plus foregone taxes as well. So it is, monetary and fiscal policy is involved here.
Yeah, almost everybody in the county, it's going to be one of your top, three or four things.
It's one of your biggest
there.
line items on your property taxes.
So anyway, that's what got me into it. These guys encouraged me, these older gentlemen, and I was working with some of the what I'll call the Republican groups. We had a couple of different Panhandle Pachyderms, North Idaho Pachyderms, the Reagan Republicans. Those different groups are all very encouraging and supportive of me. And a couple of those guys were running a business called Strategery that had worked some campaigns. So those guys helped me out. That's kind of what helped me get going. And they had enough savvy and understanding to help put a campaign together. And like I say, I think we caught him a little bit flat-footed, and he did not have the ability to recover from that. And I kind of got out ahead of him, and I beat him in the votes in both the absentee and in the live balloting.
So you win, and then what are your first 4 years look like? Because it's 4-year terms.
It was interesting because Ron Nielsen got elected the same as I did. Unfortunately, Paul Matthews lost. It's 5 trustees on the board. So basically, there was Ron and I against what I'll call the 3 liberals. Some of them, it's funny who claims to be an independent, who claims to be a Republican, who claims to be a Democrat, who's not. But
technically, NIC positions are nonpartisan. But, but that's a term that gets used very loosely these days.
These positions are filled by human beings, right?
Yes.
Just to be okay.
Yeah. Right.
Whose voting records and ideology and what they say and do and who they affiliate with generally will tell you kind of who they are, just a little bit.
I mean, some of them seem to be reptiles, but they are wearing human suits. So, of course they're going to have a leaning.
It's true. So basically, for my first 4 years, they just wanted me to sit down and shut up. I was just bulldozed. And a lot of times, sometimes Vaughn would vote with me, sometimes not. So there were a lot of 3-2 votes, a lot of 4-1 votes.
Can you give me an example of 1 4-1 vote?
Oh, geez, off the top of my head, I'd have to think about that for a second.
Okay. Whenever it comes to you.
Okay. It's been so long ago.
Yeah, it's been, we're talking over 10 years ago.
I can give you one that was interesting is when we changed athletic leagues. Unfortunately, that ended up being a 3-2. That was kind of an interesting one. But one of the big votes was to get the Parker Center built out there next to K-Tech, the program for the high schools.
Now, what is the Parker Center?
Parker Center is our career and technical education facility that we built on Lancaster out there in Rathdrum. And it's adjacent to the high school facility that is for the juniors and seniors from the local school districts. Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, and Lakeland do a co-op with that. And their juniors and seniors can do a half a day out there, either a morning or afternoon shift. And it's a bit of what I'll call an alternative for traditional students. It's for those that are more inclined to want to go in the trades, what we call blue collar, I guess. People that are better with their hands. If you want to be a diesel mechanic, work in HVAC, plumbing, construction, you get the idea, the different jobs. And that's for the high school level students to get them going there. It's very effective to help them to get out and get a job and a career if they want, or they can go on and further their education, get additional certifications and stuff through the program at the college. And so we built that literally just across the parking lot, and we co-op with them, collision repair. We shared an instructor. There's a lot of programs out there that we work together, and the kids can start out at K-Tech and advance to the Parker Center. That ended up being a 3-2 vote, and boy, it was quite a fight. Ron and I supported that. It was really Ron's deal, and I was happy to support him, kind of play wingman. And he ended up working really hard and was able to get Christy Wood to see the merit of the program, where Ken Howard and Judy Meyer voted against it, which is ironic. The president was really not with us either. It's funny to watch those things when things come out and they work out good, in the retrospect of how everybody claims it, and they're all first guys in line for the picture and to cut the ribbon and claim it all, and everybody's a hero, and people were adamantly opposed and voted against, and we were one vote away from it never happening. We spent over $20 million out there on that facility, and it's world class. I mean, we've become the example to everybody. Everybody wants to see it and tour it. You know, we self-funded that. That was both good and bad. Some people didn't like that we did that because, you know, that's not the story you want, is that we got to have money. You know, we can't do anything until the state gives us more money or the feds give us more money. The fact that we took that out of our pocket, out of our hide, you know, we had a bunch of money and then the foundation raised money and we self-funded that.
It is an interesting example of controlling the narrative, because if you were to ask people now who was responsible for the Parker Center being in existence, very unlikely will you hear Todd Banducci in the conversation. Instead, you will hear other names, some of whom voted against it or were not in support of it until years later they were in support of it. But the popular narrative is not the truth on this one. Just a very good example of how that works.
We're just going to do a little quick prompt here to the internet. Who is responsible for the building of the Parker Center in North Idaho? North Idaho College owns it. The school initiated the project, provided capital funds, managed fundraising. Major donor, the Parker Family Auto Group. Doug Parker, blah, blah, they donated $1 million. And North Idaho College ran a campaign called Building the Future to raise additional funds via donations. Architects, Architects West out of Coeur d'Alene. The one person not responsible for it is Todd No, it doesn't say that. So, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, so it doesn't. It says the school did it, but that's not really true because some of, quote, the school was opposed to it, is what you're telling me.
That's correct. Yeah, it was interesting. It was quite the arm wrestle to get there. Like I say, and it was a 3-2 vote. You know, now you'd think everybody was singing Kumbaya and it was this amazing thing and everybody was supporting it and, you know, no brainer. But it was a breath away from not happening. In the same vein, that's like when we changed the athletic conferences. I mean, I got to give Christy Wood, I don't often say very many positive things about her, but 2 votes early when I was on the board, she got it right. She voted for Parker Center. These may be her only 2 great votes. I don't know. And then she did vote with me, researched, spent a lot of time. I mean, people would be surprised to know how closely we worked on the issue of the athletic conferences. And we were aligned, and she was very passionate along with me, and to not have us change athletic conferences and go from the national level to a regional conference, the NWAC, from the NJCAA. And we got outvoted 3-2. And that was really interesting because Ron voted to make the move, as did Ken, and Christy and I voted to make the move, and Christy and I to not make the move. And it happened to be Judy Meyer was in Boise, and on the speakerphone, she had to make the tie-breaking vote. And there's some interesting thing to hear her on that speakerphone. It sounded like her husband was there with her, and maybe there were some discussions going on. And so I think that was a very calculated vote. And then she voted to make the change. And that was really interesting because Judy's one of those types of people. Judy and Steve always are a layer or 2 removed. If you watch their influence and their money and who they control and the people, but she wasn't the one on the board that ever really stepped out and made the motions or made the controversy. She was usually behind somebody else. She usually would let Christy take the lead, and she was happy to fall in behind. It was interesting how they didn't want to do anything. Rarely would they want to actually be in the spotlight there where there was a hard decision to make or something. So, you know, she could almost never be blamed for anything. She was always kind of there and voting, but she wasn't the lead. You know, so that was really an interesting moment for her where her vote was the deciding vote and all eyes were upon her and had to make that vote. And so she was the deciding vote. So she kind of had to own that one.
What's the few sentence biography of this lady? You said her name was Judy Meyer?
Yeah, her husband owned Parkwood.
I was just going to say, yeah, they own Parkwood Property
Management.
They own a lot of stuff.
That's a podcast unto itself, but they have tremendous influence.
Deep.
Intermax, people that work for them, family members. It's interesting to watch how some of these families are I don't want to say inbred, that doesn't sound quite right, but have interbreeded and have married, and some of the names, you got to check who the maiden names were for some of the gals.
Yeah, well, it's just like we were saying at the top of the show. This is a microcosm of how it works.
But you look at their employee who was on the city council, who now is on this committee down at the state level, you know, or he's on the judicial council, you know, and they're the people that are making recommendations for who's going to be the judges.
Their son-in-law's been appointed to this board, and
Gavin Newsom is Nancy Pelosi's nephew, but she's actually not Nancy Pelosi. She's Nancy D'Alessandro, and D'Alessandro was business partners with Newsom III, you know, William Newsom II. This is all just the same stuff.
Yes, it is. It's identical.
So I'm just busting in here in post quickly to play the clip that breaks down what I just said sort of inaccurately. even if you have no interest in California whatsoever, it's still a really interesting breakdown.
Pat Brown's father, Edmund Joseph Brown, was known for running scams and gambling operations in San Francisco. With the help of businessman William Newsom II, Pat Brown became governor of California for 2 terms. During his governorship, he awarded the Squaw Valley concession contract to William Newsom III and his partner, John Pelosi. The deal was criticized for the state of California paying for everything and getting nothing. William Newsom III grew up with the governor's son, Jerry, who was training to be a Jesuit priest. John Pelosi's son, Paul, married Nancy D'Alessandro, daughter of Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., who was known for smuggling heroin into the U.S. with Lucky Luciano and the Baltimore Mafia. John Pelosi's son, Ron, married William Newsom's daughter, Barbara. Over ongoing disputes about the Squaw Valley concession, William Newsom Sr. threatened to hurt the governor politically, just as Governor Brown was running for a 3rd term against Ronald Reagan. He lost. But 8 years later, the former governor's Jesuit son, Jerry, reclaimed the governorship in 1974. He appointed William Newsom III to a Placer County judgeship in 1975, and 3 years later to the State Court of Appeal. William Newsom was an attorney for oil magnate J. Paul Getty, named in the 1966 Guinness Book of World Records as the world's richest private citizen. And while serving on the appellate bench in the 1980s, he helped Getty's son, Gordon, secure a change in state trust law that allowed him to claim his share of a multi-heir trust. After Newsom retired from the bench, he became administrator of the Getty Trust and provided seed money for his son Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi's nephew, to start the plump jack business that led to a career in San Francisco politics as mayor of San Francisco and lieutenant governor of the state of California. Gavin Newsom was informally adopted by the Gettys after his parents divorced, and recently succeeded family friend Jerry Brown to be the current governor of California. For 80 years, these 4 families have ruled over the state of California politically.
It's a small town politics.
If you just do a little bit of digging, then you realize, oh, everybody's connected. Everybody is either friends, business partners, or related.
Exactly.
You hear this
That's
cabal,
correct.
cartel,
That's why
mafia,
cartel and
pick
cabal
your words,
works.
you know, it's
Like, and it's a big club, but you're not in it.
Right. Well,
and they fiercely protect their,
Oh boy, do they.
their position.
Well, and that's why like
I mean,
NIC was such a fight, is because for years and years and years, NIC, just like a number of these other institutions locally, was kind of their plaything. They could use it how they saw fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
with
piggy
whom
bank.
they saw fit. So
It was a piggy bank, and how many people have come out of NIC or work for NIC? Look at the Democrats, the liberals, the people running for office, the activists. How many current and former employees have been grown out of there and supported? That's their job, so they make their living while spewing crap in the classroom and in the community.
And then they
it's
don't
interesting
leave.
to see who's where in the system, working for government in some capacity.
They are incubated there, and then they never leave.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're all out in the private industry, in the private sector, scratching along, making livings, and most of these people are in part of the system.
yeah, man.
It's interesting.
You know, instead of deconstructing the system, how do we form our own cabal?
Oh, dude, I've talked about this all the time. It's the best cartel ever is we form the club and then we disband it and we all do our own thing. I want to take over the world and leave it the hell alone.
Exactly. Well,
But
that's the thing.
That's the disadvantage, though, is we're working against a group that they work in lockstep.
Well,
But collectivists tend to operate that way,
Yes.
of course, by their very nature.
Well,
whereas
you said it right.
People who are less collectivist, that's the inherent. It's not a bug. It's a feature of working with people who are not collectivists. We don't mobilize.
That's right. We're
but
not
they're
activists.
entrenched and they coalesce.
Yeah, on
And
top
they're-
of that,
and they're good.
they are
and
entrenched.
they are good. They're very savvy with
they
social media and the narrative,
They are.
and of course with the Coeur d'Alene Press providing cover. Coeur d'Alene Press is as corrupt as it comes.
And I think we've reached a point,
they're
though,
dirty.
as far as the press goes, those it's kind of if everybody knows, if you read the press or you subscribe to the press, with a few exceptions, you agree with the press, and then there's everybody else. who either doesn't care or understands the press is a very good example of local yellow journalism.
Well, the young gal that covered the college, she's just beyond words. And she queried me towards the end of my third tour there, my last 4 years. She said, when are you going to talk to me? And I said, well, as soon as you stop lying. When you stop lying, I'll talk to you. Well, I don't lie. Well, actually, I'll give you a couple examples here, but hey, believe what you want if you're that self-deluded. But no, I won't talk to you. I probably will never talk to you because I don't think you can stop how you do this.
Well, there are many forms of lies too. There's lies of omission. There's lies of commission. There's
twist of words.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like the way you frame something.
Oh, bury the lead. Yeah. Here's the nice headline. When that's not even. Yeah. You're right. There's a lot of techniques in journalism, and some of these people have learned them well, and they exploit them well.
Well, and there's both. There's the ones that have the true reptiles, and then I'll even give this girl the benefit of the doubt and say she's like stupid or liar. Maybe she's just stupid.
No, she's complicit.
Oh, okay. I don't know this lady. You do.
I do. No, it's intentional. But it's interesting to watch who's together.
So what was interesting to watch from my perspective as Todd's son is each term got a little more, to use the phrase the kids like to use these days, a little more spicy. So his first 4-year term was the least spicy because he was always in the minority. And in fact, I believe you got the endorsement from the press the first go around for your reelection because you weren't viewed as a threat because they had the majority still. So you were the plucky dissenter, and from the press's editorial to look a little more balanced,
sure,
like they didn't have the bias. We're like, and so we support this because we endorse you. You're the plucky upstart.
Christy and Ken don't let you put anything on the agenda. They suppress you. You really don't get to talk. They use their rules that aren't even the rules, but they tell you they're the rules. I made a mistake. I should have gone through everything to see what my actual rights were as a trustee, because they made stuff up like, well, if at least 2 people or 3 people don't agree, we won't put it on the agenda. And, they created these arbitrary things to just shut me out and shut me down.
Now, they are very good at lawfare, and they're very good at using the language and the code against you and for them.
Yeah, they don't like the rules unless they're enforcing them.
So the first term kind of went as you described. Then you had the 2 landmark things, right, which was the Parker Center and the conference change, which you lost the conference change vote. Those were kind of the 2 big movers of that term. So then move us into the second term. That got a little spicier.
A little bit, but I was still outnumbered. I really was. I just became a little more active, took a little more of a proactive role.
Found your stride.
Found my stride, fought back a little more.
And this is 2016 to 2020,
Correct.
Which is also, that's the first Trump term. So is it fair to say that the had vibes changed as a result of the national vibe?
Very little. There was the whole resistance thing going on. Just they tried to do
La
again.
resistance, to the Nazis.
This was this battle, and then we started to get into. So, it didn't make a lot of strides, and quite frankly, again, not many people are challenging people for seats. I'm still on there with Christy Wood. I'm still on there with Ken Howard. Ron had resigned before even finishing the first term, and then we had a guy that was put in his place, former superintendent from Lakeland. And that was a disappointment because about every time I thought he was going to do or say something good, all of a sudden that superintendent hat came back on, and it was definitely a disappointment because there's times I thought I was making headway and sense with him with some logic and stuff, but I think he was too busy wanting to play golf and enjoy retirement. So he finished out the term, and then we had to get the new people running in 2016. And the way it's staggered is you have 3 trustees, say in 20, and then you get 2 in 22, and then 3 in 24, and then 2 in 26. So they stagger them that way, how they do the elections. So my cycle was on the presidential cycle, 12, 16, 20, 24. So there's 3 of us up on that time. In the off time, there'd be 2 people. So 14, 18, 22, that type of thing. Unless there was somebody appointed. And depending on what they were appointed to, then they had to still face election at the next term. So it was interesting to watch who was appointed, who wasn't, who wanted to run. They were controlling that pretty hard. For example, when Judy Meyer decided to step down, they picked up the former president of the college and put him in her spot, and they thought that was a pretty good deal, and then he had to run. And then he lost, which Greg McKenzie beat him in 20, so that was great. In fact,
Did he also disappear for a few days? Why?
When Greg McKenzie beat Joe Dunlap, that was a beautiful thing. And in fact, he and his wife have now since moved out here, and they've blamed us for that too, because they've left the area eventually. It took a while, but and they lamented their departure and how they lost these great people. The press did.
They're living in exile.
Blaming us because he lost the election, and then eventually they left the community, and it's a tremendous loss. But Greg beat him, and the numbers for percentages were almost identical to when I beat Mick in 2012. The absolute numbers were higher because more registered voters and more people. But if you look at the actual percentages, it was 54-ish to 46-ish plus, but really close. I mean, within just, so that was kind of interesting.
And this was the 2020.
This was the 2020 when Greg McKenzie, Michael Barnes, and I were elected, and for the first time in a long time, we had a supposed conservative majority on the board.
Okay, so we're jumping into the third term. We'll skip over the second.
Yeah, the second term was kind of a goofy deal, and it just was a placeholder for 4 more years. And we were coming into COVID at that point.
And just to give context, the total amount of votes in 2012-16 as compared to 2020, did the voter pool, did it go from 10,000 votes to 20, or what were the numbers?
You were probably in the, I'm ballparking here, 60, 70 plus thousand, moving up to now we're over 100,000, I think, in the registered voters.
Okay, so not a small, so 54-46, that's like a pretty, you mentioned earlier, that's a drubbing.
No, there was enough votes. Yeah, it wasn't like 3 households made the difference.
Right. Okay.
No, I mean, you actually won. There was enough absolute votes.
Sometimes without that context, with the small town, you don't really know.
No, there was enough. Because remember, here's the other unusual thing. When you run for trustee at the college, it's one of the most expensive and expansive campaigns there is because it's county-wide. It's the entire county. When you run for, say, legislature, you're in LD2, Legislative District 2, Legislative District 3, Legislative District 4, Legislative District 5. Like Legislative District 4 is really Coeur d'Alene. So if you're running for LD4, you're really only campaigning in Coeur d'Alene. Yeah. If you're in LD5, you get a little bit of Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, a little bit south, a little bit north. If you're 2, you're up higher. If you're 3, you're kind of Hayden and up in there. So the legislators, they're campaigning in a fraction of the space that a trustee for the college is. We have to be from our zone to run, but everybody in the county can vote on us. So we're like a countywide officer having to run countywide for a campaign. So it's a big deal. So there's a lot more votes. Yeah, a lot smaller if you're in a city election or district election, highway district, water district, or even again for the legislature. In the legislative district, there's a lot less votes. But yeah, by comparison, we're as big as it gets for voting here for the number of people that are eligible.
Okay, so now we're in November, for the November 2020, the third term election. This March 2020 was when the totalitarianism hit the fan. I'd already moved here by then. I literally from March to, I was here by August, no thanks, no California, I'm going to Saneville. I was here in August, and that election is in November. So this is all a pretty short period of time. Chaos has ensued. This might be Saneville, but like we were talking about at the top of the show, chaos ensued everywhere because there's people bought into it to varying degrees depending on the region you were in. And just because more people were sane here than in other regions doesn't mean plenty of people didn't buy it. So when I'm looking at some of these, board meetings and looking at huge crowds for meetings that you were probably used to having next to nobody at. And now I'm looking at, 100 people in this room, and half of them are got their faces covered. And I mean, you get taken back to just how weird and dystopian and chaotic it was. And I can't even imagine being in the room.
It was interesting because you're right. NIC was kind of ignored to a large degree from the public. Nothing to see here. It was very opaque. So most people had no idea what was going on. And everybody was just, the platitudes. Oh, NIC's doing great. NIC's doing great. The paper would say, NIC's doing great. Everybody loves NIC. NIC's great. Donate your money. Donate your money. We have the big house raffle every year. Just go along. Nothing to see here. We got it covered. And they had that control. And when we got to conservative majority in 2020, that sent a lot of people into what I would call a tizzy.
Let me see if I can sum this up quickly in dumbass layman's terms. In November 2020 election, a bunch of people who weren't supposed to win won.
Oh.
And so all of a sudden you had some allies. Is that a fair summary?
And some enemies.
It is. And here's the funny part of that is I had the two hangers on from the, that had been on the board for a while. Greg won by an upset, and then Greg McKenzie, and then Michael Barnes won in an upset. And here's what's so funny. They were so confident. I don't think they thought they could beat me at that point. I still had a pretty strong coalition of support. I ran unopposed. So they didn't even oppose me in 2020. So I think they figured we'll win one or both the others. Todd will still be a minority, and we'll press on, and we'll continue to muzzle him. And surprise, surprise,
they swept.
We swept, and their heads exploded.
Now, my understanding of why that happened, and maybe it's just what I wish is the reason, but is that the public here was witnessing the freaking dystopia that was going on a day-to-day basis in this country, and went, no, like we need some non-establishment people, because we really don't like what we're seeing as far as how the public is behaving. I mean, they were running the pandemic propaganda hard.
I think it was a combination of many factors. And again, I'll even say this, what I would call the conservative consortium, if you will, conservative caucus, conservative, group was a little bit better coalesced. We've seen some of that peel off. We've had a few that have decided to be more rhino, and it's interesting how they've aligned more with the establishment and what I'll call the beautiful people again. It's been interesting to watch the machinations of some of the folks and the priorities and how I think they've sold themselves out personally. I don't see an honor and integrity in how some of them are acting, but they sure sound self-righteous, and boy, they sure scream loud that they're idealistic and pure and they're doing this all for the greater good. So it's been interesting to watch some of the folks that have been peeled off what was part of the coalition that I had, people that contributed money to me, supported my son, his business and stuff, suddenly became our enemies and attacked us and tried to boycott our businesses and say false things against us, make false accusations against us, and all sorts of things. What's so interesting is it didn't become about ideas or topics or even agendas or programs. It became very personal. They tried to kill my name.
It's amazing what a difference 4 or 5 years can make when it comes to relationships or political wins and political allies and political enemies. Amazing how quickly things can change.
Now that you weren't just the plucky upstart and that you were actually the majority, now they revert to their tactics that they always use. And I don't know, the reptiles, whatever you want to call them, like personal attacks that's how you regain control.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Scott. It's the moment that the conservative side was actually a threat to the system, was actually a threat to make some changes. And Dad used to say this all the time, because you're over the target when you're taking the heaviest flack.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so for the first time, the board has a conservative majority, and the flack came in very aggressively. And a lot of people who were allies saw the political winds shift, saw the pressure being applied, and shifted for one reason or another. And it turns out there were a lot of people who claim to be conservatives or claim to follow the Republican Party platform, but don't actually believe those things. So Dad used the term rhino earlier. It's Republican in name only. So there's a lot of that in this area.
Well, some people were just very self-serving, too many quid pro quos, if you will. It's like, what do you get out of this? And what's the benefit? What's the cost? What are you sacrificing? And people don't like to sacrifice, and they don't want it to be hard. And sometimes being unpopular for some of these folks, it's just unbearable. It's just too hard for them, for whatever reason, because of their business or because of just their personal, comfort, or because they like to be liked and they want to be invited. And, so it's real interesting how people will just fall into that, again, the kind of the go along to get along, and I want to be liked, and this is popular. And again, they demonized me and others so hard that some people, it scared people off. People didn't want to be associated or affiliated with that. I think one of the things they did intentionally,
they did try to make it toxic to be associated with certain individuals. So.
They tried to make it so that no one would ever want to run that wasn't from their camp, because we're going to ruin your life.
Sure.
We're going to hurt your family. We're going to hurt your business. We're going to hurt your associates, your friends. Anybody that gets near you, we're going to taint. We're going to get out in these narratives.
Oh, yeah.
And you had these people quarterbacking this effort, and God, it was brutal. Death threats, attacks. I mean, there's different things that went on.
But we're speaking in generalizations right now, and we're kind of jumping ahead towards where it went. So at the beginning of the third, sweep, right? So now the quote-unquote conservatives have a majority on the board, and things look kind of exciting to make some what we would consider positive changes, right?
Yeah, it must have initially been thrilling news.
It was almost euphoric, I think, in some camps. Of course, they're fighting against the system that is well entrenched and designed to not change, and they ran up against that immediately. However, you guys did make pretty big headlines right off the bat by opposing the college president's
Mask
policy
mandate.
for the mask mandate.
Now
so that was that was a fight that came up early and it was a big deal.
And
Made
what's
headlines.
so funny is people accuse us of firing him over that. Had nothing to do with it.
No.
Well, let's
We were also authorized by the legislature. That was in our purview to make that decision on the mask mandate.
as per the format that I promised we were that will be the structure of the show. I want to deconstruct how the mainstream covers it. So let's take a listen to this.
Thanks for staying up with Nightside. I'm Aaron Luna. Former President Rick McLennan was fired last month in a 3-2 vote by the board. Since then, the college has been without a president. Caitlin Knapp has what's next for North Idaho College.
Finding a temporary president took about a month. Leading up to this point was pretty rocky. On August 23rd, the former president, Rick McLennan, issued a mask mandate. 4 days later, the board rescinded it and fired McLennan a month later. Graduate Sean Keenan and other people protested before the meeting tonight, saying the termination was a political move.
I think what we're seeing here.
Yeah, this is just some random student, as far as I can tell. Do you know who that is? I think the local news thing here just interviewed a random student.
The student probably knows what he's talking about.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
It was a political move.
I think what we're seeing here at the college is the continuation and the spiral into chaos.
Reporting in Coeur d'Alene, Caitlin Knapp, 4 News Nightside.
Chaos.
Let me just make sure I have this timeline correctly. You're telling me Rick issued a mask mandate in August of 2021? So that's a year and a half after 2 weeks to slow the spread? Do I have that right?
I don't remember those dates off the top of my head, but
That's when this is from.
so I would. It sounds right. Yes. Yeah.
It wasn't in the beginning. It wasn't August 20.
No.
Yeah.
No. Remember, the election wasn't actually until November of 20.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So this
we're
is post.
We're in the next year.
Yeah, this is almost a year later.
Yeah.
Okay. So and then I especially, that's why I kind of love that they found like the one student who was going to just, this is it's chaos, whatever the hell. So in other words, you establishment make some dystopian proclamation that everyone must cover their face, which is just about as chaotic and weird as I can possibly imagine anybody decreeing anything. And then when your decree is struck down, that's chaos?
Well, it's worse than that. We even had to have one of our meetings in the auditorium in Schuler Hall. They distanced us. We had the plastic shields up. But then we weren't properly doing the accommodations. I'm getting parents to call me. We're not giving accommodations to students. We're not. The whole thing was a joke. And they were not handling this well. But, of course, they were drinking the Kool-Aid. So they were. And so it's so funny how all we did was try to apply some common sense. But in the same vein, that's something that Paul said earlier. It's like if you get a new mayor or a new president, and Trump suffered through this his first term, if the people underneath you are undermining you the whole time, I'm now looking back on it, I should have fired the attorney, Mark Lyons. I should have tried to get him fired immediately and get a new attorney because I think he worked against me the whole time in some ways while I was the board chair. I don't know.
You're telling me an attorney was acting duplicitous?
I know it. Shocking. It just appears that way looking back on it now in hindsight and some of the things that occurred and his future involvement with the college and everything. But you don't know all that. You don't know what are the weeds and you don't know where to pull them out by the roots and get the people that are supporting you. Trump 2.0 figured that out and they came in and bam, bam, did it. We didn't know that in 20 like they didn't know that in 16 at the presidential level. And so I was being undercut. We were being undermined by the staff and faculty, the senior leadership very badly and by Rick. And, the leader sets the tone and everybody plays off that tone, whether you can be nice or be a jerk.
Rick being President McLennan. Yeah,
McLennan.
So if you got the guy up top and you got the bureaucrats down below,
everybody feeds off
working against you, and you're stuck in the middle with a slim majority trying to make stuff happen. That's a tough scenario.
It is, and we finally got tired of that scenario.
Yeah, no kidding.
And some things that were done were just we'll just say not appropriate, and so we felt that at that time that was the best thing for the college. Again, here's the deal too: it's supposed to be about the kids. About the college. It's not about the people that are running it or the people in the town or people who's got these vested interests. There's all these different people that have an agenda here, or these different groups or factions or whatever. And, the teachers, the professors are important, the teachers, the instructors, whatever. But they're not the focus. It's the students. And that gets lost.
Well, it's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be, but you could sure tell when the establishment folks and all the people with these other vested interests, the minute they started out, it's all about the students. You knew it absolutely wasn't.
How much interaction do most of those, like let's say the board, how much interaction with students do they have?
Well, I think a lot of them had not very much. In fact, there was a real stink on that. And a couple of the presidents, even this last one, Nick, basically put a moratorium on contact with the board. He didn't want anybody to talk to us. And I think that was kind of the same. With Joe Dunlap, it was okay.
We're going to leave these plastic shields up actually just forever.
But they didn't like the fact that people could talk to us. And Nick's, the current president now, he's an interesting cat. I don't think too highly of him, to be honest. But they don't want the trustees to interact with faculty, staff, and with the students. And we have to keep reminding them, or I kept reminding them, well, they're my constituents. They're voters. They're taxpayers. They're the people that represent the college. I want to hear from the students. I'd like to hear from the faculty. Maybe something positive once in a while would be helpful, and there were some. And from the staff. But those people had to be so very careful because it's like whack-a-mole. Yeah. If they stuck their head up and they were against the orthodoxy, they got crushed.
There's a real culture of suppression at NIC. It still exists.
Retribution. And it was harsh and swift.
And that's, again, not a bug. It's a feature of academia.
Yeah, you toe the line or you pay the price.
Other things. But there's more support for the conservative board than you would think.
There was a lot, and even from inside the campus, but it was all a layer deep and anonymous, or at least off. Like I had a guy even at my church, and a teacher, and he was careful. He didn't want to be seen in public with me. But he supported me like crazy.
Yeah, and this is such a clash. This all the time too. They behind closed doors, they're all support, but then they don't do it in public because they fear for their own, community standing.
But you have to for your job, for your career, for everything, because these people, it's amazing to see who comes and goes. There was a senior officer that was running the Italian program.
That's just called the mafia. Program. You can just say it.
Yeah. Well, he's Italian. He's a good friend. I have high respect for him, and he actually sent some communication to the current president, who's a retired Army officer, lieutenant colonel, basically expressing some disappointment in him and some of what he'd done and calling him out. And the irony of it is how quickly that Italian program just disappeared.
They put on some cement shoes and see you later.
That's a nice program you've got there, Professor. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to him.
And that's an impressive man who's since become a trustee on another board for a bit. A guy of high reputation and respect, in my opinion, senior officer, served his country well, but he was so bold to call out a fellow senior officer, as I had done. But that's how that works too, But you go back and look at Nick's history, back when he was on the school board back in Virginia, and he's a politician. He's way more a politician than I ever was as a trustee, and look at what he was. I guess you'd have to call him a Democrat probably, but hey. But again, we hide in the nonpartisan, theoretically.
Well, it's evidenced by the way that current and former presidents have, just the way they carry themselves, the way they behave. The position is very well paid, by the way. It's way overpaid.
Well, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
There are a ridiculous amount of perks and things, and you would think that the guy was damn near king, but really he's just the president of a small community college.
Yes, it's just a small community college.
Specifically to the McLennan thing, one of the issues behind how that all went down is McLennan would operate outside of his purview. So the board of trustees is actually a more powerful, to be a trustee is a more powerful position than most people think. You have power of the purse, but you also have power over policy, and you vote on all that stuff. And a guy like McLennan would go around. He would unilaterally, he would act unilaterally and go around the board when the board didn't vote to his liking. Sure. And he would do that rather often, do things without telling the board, do things in spite of the board's decisions. And that's not an unusual feature, again, of current and former presidents of NIC, but it's highly inappropriate, it's highly unprofessional, but it's the attitude that current and former presidents have had.
Can you give an example of other time
Nick Swain would do that, McLennan would do that, and what was interesting is when we had Dr. Sabali or Dr. South, they actually treated the board with respect. Michael Sabali, Greg South treated the board with respect and the proper courtesy and everything in that proper relationship, where the other two, we were a nuisance and to be avoided or ignored or circumvented as much as possible. And then you ended up with the deal with McLennan and his personal relationship with Mr. Ramswamy, who ran the NWCCU, the accreditation group, which helped launch that warfare against the college that they leveraged to try to pressure us by saying, well, we'll take your accreditation away if you don't toe the line and do exactly what we tell you to do and what we want you to do. They basically wanted to make it so we were incapable of doing anything.
They wanted to tie your hands.
To neuter us, I guess. Let's just use that word. Yeah, to pressure and blackmail us.
So I'm actually glad you brought this up, Pops, because this is the big issue with NIC that is fresh in everybody's mind, is the issue of accreditation. So if you followed the mainstream narrative, you would think that because of a small group of people, particularly Todd Banducci and Greg McKinsey and other board members, that they would be personally responsible for the downfall of NIC and its disaccreditation for reasons.
Well, let's play.
Because it's so academic.
This is a production. This is an Idaho Public Television production. It's a podcast that they put out. So let's hear a clip from them.
Hello and welcome to the Idaho Reports podcast. I'm Logan Finney. Joining me this week is Kevin Richard of Idaho Education News to update us on the status of North Idaho College.
Now, when
Kevin's a special man.
Yeah, I know. When his name was just mentioned right now, I watched Todd's eyes roll actually to the back of his head and then all the way back around the other side. That's how hard he rolled his eyes. But yeah, so now you do a little quick digging, because I don't know these people from Adam necessarily. You pull up let's Idaho Reports Public Television. Well, that becomes immediately clear where that's Idaho, that's NPR for Idaho, that's Idaho PBS. Anybody that knows anything about media, NPR and PBS, I mean, those are elitist voices of America.
Well, look,
those are the beautiful people.
When you see the fundraisers for the PBS channels or anything, and all of a sudden you see Judy Meyer on there. I mean, she's one of the people that's in the costume, doing the Downton Abbey thing and other stuff. And they're down there raising money and donating. And I mean, the connections here, they're all over the place. And with the old regime of Butch Otter and now with the current governor, there's this regime. Had Brad Little lost a couple times ago, this whole dynamic would have changed, and some of the power structure in this North would have changed too, because there's this residual group of people that are hanging on with his train and the power, and there's a vestige of that that's still going. We've got so close to changing all that, but when Brad Little has retained, we lost that when Labrador lost to him.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to play more from this podcast and how it covered the accreditation, at least in the beginning, because this broadcast is from October 22, I believe. But just quickly, I mean, can you guys see this monitor? I pulled up idahonews.org, which is where this show emanates from, and I just kind of started clicking around, and I clicked on the People's Perspective tab. So what comes up at the very top is a bunch of masked up little kids. So they look like they're sort of running through a playground of a school, I guess, but they're all masked up. So this is not a Wayback Machine. This is not an archive. This is if you go to their site now and you click on it, boom, masked up kids. That's the world they love. But anyway, it says 2022 survey, the People's Perspective. Okay, and it's I don't know why they have that picture at the top. They freaking love dystopian imagery, but there it is. Okay, the economy takes over education as the top priority. Oh, by the way, October 2022, which is where this thumbnail is from, that's 2.5 years after 2 weeks to slow the spread. They've masked up kids on their website. So just to give you an idea of where these folks are coming from.
I think we were only on our 4th or 5th booster at that point. But chronologically, I don't do it by years. I do it by booster.
Yeah.
So we were on the 6th booster, I think,
at that time. That's your reference point. Yeah, that was 6B. Yeah. Okay, so public education is still extremely important, but a surge, according to who, but a surge of economic worries caused in part by the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the ubiquitous framing of cause and effect. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The COVID-19 pandemic doesn't do anything. Policies do stuff. Okay. Leads more Idahoans to cite the economy as the most important issue facing the state for the first time in 5 years, and now it's got some polling data. Now this is a professionally produced website. This is, like I said, this is Idaho Public Television. This is a very well-financed group of people. It's the Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever the hell. You'll hear it at the end because it's the disclaimer. It's brought to you by. In fact, do I have it here? Let's see.
He behaved.
Maybe I don't have it, but it goes through because this is a broadcast brought to you by generous funding from the Irving Farquhar Foundation. They all do this. But then if you who are those people? And you look at the Form 990s and you dive a little bit. You're like, oh, it has $175 million in assets. These are very well-funded organizations, even at the local level, or maybe even especially at the local level. And this is the sort of stuff they put together. Okay, so the reason I bring this up, and their website and these masked up kids, I just kind of want to give an idea of where media like this, where is it emanating from? Who are the people that are funding it and putting it on? Why do they like masked up little kids so much? It's very confusing. They've also done absolutely no self-reflection on why it is that all of a sudden Idahoans are, they're sort of giving statistics on like, all of a sudden way more people are interested in homeschooling and people are pulling their kids out of public school, private school. It looks like at no point did they make any connection between their masked up kids and the fact that people are going to their places less. They don't acknowledge it anywhere on this entire page. Or the performance
of public schools.
So anyway, I kind of wanted to give you a sense of where this was emanating from.
It's a very well-polished propaganda machine.
It absolutely is.
So in January, Michael Barnes, who had been elected in 2020, he stepped down amid questions about whether he was actually a legal resident of Kootenai County. Now, Barnes had been an ally of Chairman Todd Banducci. He and Banducci and Greg McKenzie formed this sort of conservative wing, if you will, on the NIC Board of Trustees. They were the three trustees who voted to fire President Rick McLennan back in September.
Well, I have a quick question. Do they ever refer to the Christy Wood set as the leftist side, or do they only call you conservative?
Yes. Yeah, no, you're right. They don't. It's interesting how they have to use pejorative terms in describing us, but the others are all, they're so reasonable and common sense and normal, and they're just mainstream and mainline.
And then there's the far right.
The regular people, they do everything right, and they're right along with all of us. That's normal. And everybody else, like me, well, clearly we're not. We're far something or extreme something, or we're something. We have to be, there's got to be a tagline, some sort of
pejorative, like you said.
It's funny because how President Trump has kind of used that to his advantage, where he gives everybody nicknames. It's interesting how Trump studied labels, and how he has flipped that script. And he comes out aggressive, sets the narrative, puts the names on them.
Crooked Hillary.
And this stuff sticks. So he watched this, and actually one of the greatest things that probably happened was him losing in 20 so that he could come back and win in 24, because he's been far more effective this term because he was far better prepared for it than he would have been even for a second term.
That sort of labeling is terrific. Like he's mastered the art of trolling. He's a troll. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying it as a descriptive. Like, you have to be good at trolling if you want to be effective. I'm actually shocked that this Jamoke didn't say far right. He actually just said conservative. Usually they go far right.
Well, we're conservative wing.
Wing, wing. Okay, so let's continue on with this.
On the NIC Board of Trustees, they were the three trustees who voted to fire President Rick McLennan back in September.
Hold on, I love that. Hold on.
Fire President Rick McLennan back in September.
He's like breathless.
Without explanation and without cause.
Okay, so now, without cause, is my understanding is that's a legal term. Without explanation, is that true?
It's a personnel matter. See, they make this thing when they know better. I love how they ask the questions and make the accusations when they know we can't talk. It's funny is how some people love to violate the privacy of executive session and the way it's supposed to, you're not supposed to talk about executive session outside of executive session. It's like Fight Club. Nobody talks about Fight Club. So they do that routinely, and they've done it all. They did it the whole time I was on the board, where we're trying to adhere to the fact that there's confidentiality, there's privacy, there's things that you're not supposed to disclose things out of executive session. But the other
things would get disclosed, or we would call that leaked
all the time. It was an interesting tool that they would use. And so they would say, well, they didn't say anything. Well, hello, we're not supposed to. Legally, we can be sued if we say something. So we can't say anything. And that's where my attorney should have helped us more too. It was times he was somewhat helpful, and times where, and like I got accused of something once, and he did finally have to say, no, that's baloney. And people still ignore the fact that they put out a thing that said that was baloney. But, it's a narrative that Christy Wood and others keep carrying. That's one of their
Is it where the accusation is the headline and the retraction is on page 111?
Well, like when Dan Gukin accused me, supposedly of possibly, assaulting him, and it turned out it was all him on the video, and he's the one that was going crazy and swearing and dropping F-bombs in front of a young female employee at the church we were in. And he went crazy, and then you find the backstory is, why did I even approach Dan during the break there outside? It was just to ask him, actually I wasn't even asking him, I just suggested that he might owe a couple of ladies an apology from dropping F-bombs and throwing a napkin at him at the Lincoln Day dinner, a woman in her 60s and a woman in her 80s. And I was like, Dan, I think maybe you might owe these ladies an apology. He just launched into F-bombs at me and went crazy.
He was waiting, like he was just like waiting to explode at you.
And then, stormed out of there and went to his car, and the whole way out, you got him on 4 different videos because It was at the Altar Church. They have cameras everywhere after Pastor Tim got shot.
Did he get shot in church?
Well,
I don't know anything about it.
In the church parking lot.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
So they have cameras everywhere, including the parking lot. You can see Dan all the way out to his rig, still, flailing and making noise and screaming and yelling.
I just want everyone to know that Todd is making movements like he's the inflatable thing outside of a used car dealership.
Yeah, sorry.
Makes you want to buy a car.
Dan's not fit for leadership at all. It's so funny running for mayor, but Dan does not have the what's the word I'm looking for? The statesmanship. Oh, that's a good word.
But they never label him left wing when they talk about him in the press.
Yes,
the
he's
things he says,
left wing
his
contingent.
rants
The
where all he
left-wing
does is F-bomb
contingency.
and scream and yell and make fun of Christians and do porn stuff. I mean, this is one of those guys that's just not fit.
That event is actually a good example of modus operandi, because afterwards, Dan Gookin actually filed a police report.
After he called Kristen Wood that night on the way home, they got front page above the fold, Todd Banducci. Yeah, where was ever the
allegedly
retraction?
assaults.
Do you know the police never even interviewed me? And then when I went back to them and said, hey, do we file charges for the false accusation?
Yeah, really.
Because you just did a report. You involved the city, the county,
or libel.
the employees. You've interviewed. You've done a whole investigation.
Abuse of resources.
And they tried to say, well, actually, he never really filed a report. What do you mean? How do you do all this if nothing was filed?
And it was so easy, too, because you just pointed, like, here are the receipts. All you had to do was go to the video footage, and it's clear as day that, nothing about the event as reported is true. But the damage is already done.
But of course, they weren't going to hold Dan accountable.
Of course not.
Well, that's the city of Coeur d'Alene.
And this is like you said a second ago, Paul. This is modus operandi. This is what I was saying. Like these tactics, I recognize them because they're the same everywhere. They're used and utilized the exact same way. These are rules for radicals tactics. These are Alinskyite tactics. You accuse your opponent of that which you are guilty.
Projection. Yeah. They kept, that's like with the death threats. I mean, there's stuff left on the voicemail. Sometimes they hit the number, sometimes not. But it'd be something like, your wife should be raped and killed and you need to die.
Click.
Are you kidding me?
Is that true? Have you saved these?
That was left on my office phone. So there was a time where Sheriff Norris, I did not request this, but he was aware of what was going on, and some things were reported, where they had an emphasis patrol watching our house.
Wow.
People saw patrol cars sitting in the cul-de-sac by our house or driving by, and our neighbors noticed the heavier presence from the sheriff. Now Sheriff Norris took that serious, and I thank him for that, and did his job. And if I was in the city of Coeur d'Alene, I doubt I'd have gotten the common courtesy from Chief White.
Well, there was no courtesy from Chief White. Coeur d'Alene PD is just an extension.
They can have a riot in my meeting.
Yeah.
But if anybody even done anything close to that in a city council meeting, they'd have been walked out of there in handcuffs. Sure. But they can shut my meeting down. They can pull a fire alarm. They can do all the things in the meeting that I'm running, and it's okay.
That's what happens when meetings get run by the far right.
I have elected officials like Gookin and Wood and who's the other city councilman, the older gentleman, English. They're at that meeting, and they're part of the disruption of my meeting. Other elected officials having no respect for other elected officials' meetings. That's just egregious.
Let's finish out the last of the NPR Idaho podcast here.
What we've seen these past 2 years has been just so much discord and so much disarray.
And again, this is like October 2022, so this is about 2 years after the election. And again, the tactic, I don't know if this guy knows he's doing it. You cause chaos and craziness by doing insane dystopian things like telling everyone to cover their face, and then when people oppose you, you accuse them of causing chaos.
Disarray coming out of North Idaho College. It's a classic example of how local elections have consequences. Todd Banducci is the guy at the center of all of this. He is the eye of the hurricane, if you will.
Good one.
He was elected unopposed in 2020. Even though he'd been on the board for several years, even though earlier in 2020 his fellow trustees privately censured him over conduct.
Sure.
And how he behaved.
Yeah, well, what is he referring to?
A false accusation that, again, was later disavowed. In fact, the attorney, through our communications person, Laura Rumpler, when the national media approached and others, said that did not happen, and that is not a true statement, and what you're saying is not accurate or correct. And then people have tried to say there was some settlement or something done, blah, blah, blah. There was no such thing. The only thing that was, if you want to call it a settlement, the agreement was that, hey, we'll just avoid each other. I don't need to work with that person. They don't need to work with me. That's fine. We'll just keep our distance. It's not someone I need to work with on a regular basis. That's fine. Clearly, we don't seem to be on the same page. Fine. And then those guys tried to make a big deal of it, did an investigation. I mean, at the end of the day, it was a big nothing burger. So then they censored me and said, be nicer, be kind.
Dad has been accused on more than one occasion of hurting people's feelings.
And occasionally I'm a little bit guilty of sounding like I'm from the South. I might use the terms dear or sweetie or honey.
You monster.
I know it.
I'm traumatized.
And
once in a while I call girls chicks.
And I'd be really even guilty too if I accidentally hugged somebody or something happened like that, especially if it was someone that was actually hugging me or a friend or there was one.
This is where being Italian works against us. We're huggers.
Yeah.
Like
if
one
we
of the
were
gals
Scotch Irish, would be okay.
Was in a senior position and we were saying goodbye or something. We've been visiting and she's a former senior military officer, retiree herself, very sharp, impressive lady. But we were saying goodbye or something and we gave each other a quick hug and we disappeared. Someone saw that and made a big thing about that,
That you hugged a friend?
We hugged each other, yeah. But this is stuff they had to try to come up with.
Yeah, man, you're really sucking air.
To tear me down. Because again, it's hard when you go against someone that's an officer. I ended up from the start to finish of my career with a couple breaks, but it was 41 and a half years in the military. Graduated from the Air Force Academy, lived under an honor code. I'm a guy who, duty, honor, country is what I bleed, red, white, and blue. Honor and integrity is what I understand. My late wife would joke that I can't lie or even exaggerate. My face just gives away. She would poke at me.
Can we play the national anthem while he's talking?
But what they chose to come after me was of my integrity and try to say I was a bad man. That's the irony of this whole thing is people laughed at it. That was because against everybody else, I guess that's what you do. You try to say they're a horrible person. And I was the embodiment of Paul even mentioned earlier. I went back in the military after I was already out, well after my 30 years. To volunteer to go back and help at Fairchild for a few years because they were undermanned and understaffed and couldn't fill their senior leadership on their command staff, filling the slot. I'm a patriot. I know it's bad.
I love my country.
I do. I saw the world, serving my country. It's what you do. And I bleed red, white, and blue, and I'm a guy that takes face value and I tell you what I think, and I think what I tell you. I'm not that artful in my speech or clever. And that drove people crazy too, because people knew who and what I was, and they didn't like it. Like when we got to the 2020, they didn't want me to be at the debates because they're afraid I'd help the two others because I was unopposed. Because in 16 or 18, Judy Meyer was unopposed, and they let her come to the debate, and she was helping the people that weren't as knowledgeable, and she kind of carried them.
Ooh, handy.
And so they were afraid I'd do that in 20. So they literally disinvited me from the debates and told me not to come. They did not want me.
Think about that, though, for a second. Like, really stew on that. They disinvited a current trustee
who's up for election
from going to
the
debates amongst trustees.
They did not want me.
Well, let me.
And then people on social media started to complain, and it was funny because one guy comes out and a bunch of people were like, Banducci's not going to be there. Banducci's not going to be there. And he comes out with, well, first off, they don't want him there. He wasn't invited. And secondly, Todd's been on the board for 8 years, and if you don't know Todd, if you do know Todd, he says, and I don't support Todd. I don't even like him. But if you don't know where Todd stands by now, then you haven't been paying attention. You've had your head in the sand. So it was a funny thing to watch a guy that didn't like me, came out and defend the fact that I wasn't going to be there, even though I wasn't supposed to be there.
Who was that?
I don't want to say.
I'm not going to say.
Oh, okay. So many questions. I have so many questions. All these people, but with no names.
We could go back on Facebook. It's on Facebook. Probably immortalized forever. But he was defending my not being there.
Let me frame
tell them
it.
They were stupid if they didn't know me.
How the Coeur d'Alene press would, so it doesn't sound so crazy, is, how did you just say it? A sitting chair disinvited from debate. How about far right chair prevented from sowing chaos at debate?
Chaos.
Yeah. So then now they're heroes for disinviting you. They don't want the far right to sow chaos.
Well, remember this was 2020, so I wasn't board chair yet. Oh. I was still muted at that point.
Okay.
I was.
Just a normal trustee.
I had 8 years of having the thumb on me. In 7 of the 8 years that I was on that board, either Christy Wood or Ken Howard were chairman. And the only time it wasn't them was the last year was Joe Dunlap when he was coming up for election in 2020 because he'd been appointed to replace Judy Meyer. So they purposely appointed him as chairman of the board, and he'd been the president of the college. So president gets put in there. He's part of their little group. This is a sweet deal. He's got to run to be elected. We've made him board chair. He comes into the election, and Greg McKenzie beats him.
So you'll notice, though, those first 8 years, not much power. Then 2020 comes along. The quote-unquote right-wing contingency.
Far right,
extremists sweep the election. And then you have the kerfuffle with the mask mandate, and the board votes it, the extremist right-wing board votes it down, and then fires McLennan because of just that. Obviously, no other reason.
No cause, no explanation.
Here's where it gets particularly interesting, and this
that.
is why I want the play-by-play, is with the Michael Barnes issue and the residency thing, which
Ken
interestingly,
Howard already had a home in New Mexico.
interestingly
for a couple
applied
years,
to the conservative.
And we were
but
having
not
to organize our meetings for when he could fly back from New Mexico on his schedule.
So hold on, I'm setting it up.
I know, but I want to say one last thing. The whole cause thing, the reason there was a provision in his contract that he could be fired without cause, which is normal, which has been removed from the contracts. Mark Lyons, when he did a new contract with Nick Swain, removed that, so he couldn't even do that. But because of the lawsuits and the litigation and the expense, we were advised, working with our legal counsel and working with what we thought was best with the college and working with how we were advised and how everything went down, it was chosen that was the best course of action to remove the current president at that time and to replace him with someone else. So we took the course of action based on how we were advised and legal counsel and in consideration of the students, the school, cost, expense, and everything else of what would be best at that time for the school, and that's the course of action we took.
And here's the kicker. It was within the contract.
Parameters of the contract.
It was legal.
We followed the language. And whether we could have done it for cause or not, I'm not going to speak to, but let me just say I think we had options, and so that's fine. But we chose the option that I would call would be the one of path of least resistance in some ways and of less cost and less bad press for the college and all that. So there was a lot of factors and reasons that went into
Of course,
the
that
decisions
didn't
that
pan
were
out
made.
that way at all. Instead, it blew up even harder, and everybody wanted answers, and the board couldn't talk about it.
Right.
And then everybody was left to make their own conclusions. And of course, the mainstream narrative was something completely different than the truth.
Best president since sliced cheese,
Right.
man.
I wanted to build up for the play-by-play of kind of how those last couple of years went, because that's really where the meat and taters are, and that's where the death threats started coming from. That's where all of the nastiness really came out.
And
those last couple
did we
years.
finish with him?
And there was a reason for it.
That gentleman criticizing me because he loves me too.
He might. Let's.
How he behaved and how he made other people uncomfortable with his, aggressive behavior.
Okay, that was it. We were right at the end there. That was the last part of it. But again, I
I'm
can't.
scary, don't you know, when I'm intense.
I'm sitting next to you and I'm scared.
Oh, I know it.
I guess I'm just used to being around the far right. Doesn't faze me. But this is, again, I just can't. I have to ask that same question about this guy. Stupid or liar? Is he a reptile, or is he just? Does he not hear the absurdity of what he's saying?
How he behaved and how he made other people uncomfortable with his, aggressive behavior.
So, in other words, you can force students to cover their faces indefinitely. You can force jab them with whatever the hell product, doesn't matter even what it is.
Or tell them their career's over in academics because they won't take the shot.
Right, you can ruin their lives. You can create a dystopia. You can create an authoritarian dystopia in the most literal sense. Well, you don't understand, Scott. The air was dangerous. Well, it doesn't matter. Whatever reason you think is justifying your behavior, you can be like, well, we needed to be authoritarian. The air was dangerous. Okay, but you're still creating an authoritarian dystopia. You're walking around with a literal faceless population, and then opposing that makes other people uncomfortable. You are making people uncomfortable is such a wild understatement for what they were doing to the population at that time, and then to turn around and accuse the person opposed to it, it's beyond belief.
Well, that's because they were doing it politely, Scott.
They were
polite tyranny.
Cover your face or else.
Cover your face or else. Oh, it's a civilized.
Well, it's polite. Yeah, the beautiful people. You wouldn't know they're beautiful on account of their faces covered.
Yeah, but those who resist are impolite and a menace to society.
Yes, that's right. You're a menace to society if you don't get down with totalitarian dystopia. You will engage in our totalitarianism until we tell you not to, because the air is dangerous.
It's the polite thing to do.
We're aggressive if we disagree with their narrative or their agenda,
which is wildly aggressive. I can't imagine by the way, nobody would have been able to imagine anything more aggressive and ridiculous. If I would have showed some of my sort of pinko adjacent friends from the Bay Area that picture that I showed you guys of those masked up little kids in elementary school, if I would have traveled back in time to, let's say, August of 2019, and I would have showed them that picture, they would have been horrified and confused. What is this? Like some sort of Epstein training ground? Is this Komsomol? Is this a picture from 1920? What is this? Which, by the way, even Komsomol didn't mask up their freaking adherents. I can't get over the stark visual, physical, and mental abusive nature of the masks specifically. Even putting aside all the non-essential, this, that, and all the other chaos that they sowed for life during those years. Chaos. that they so deliberately. The masks particularly are as dystopian as it gets. Right out of you couldn't even find science fiction that had something like that because it's too on the nose. It's too ridiculous. It's not even creative. Like if you want to illustrate what a dystopia looks like, you wouldn't use that imagery because it's unoriginal. It's not even. You see what I'm saying? But then they did it in real life, and then they have the gall to talk about making people uncomfortable. You loved making people uncomfortable. You thrived on it. I watched you.
Well, so Thomas Sowell, one of my favorite economists, has a quote where he says, "It's amazing to me that it is considered greed to keep what's yours,
Yeah.
but it is not greedy to take that which does not belong to you in the form of taxes and whatnot." You can apply the same concept to aggression versus non-aggression, and in polite society, you do what you're told or else, and that's considered to be non-aggressive. Those of us who resist are considered to be the aggressors when it's completely backwards.
Yep.
I'm not out there. I'm not the one out there telling people, do what I say or else. They are the ones saying, do what we say or else.
Yep.
And resisting all of a sudden makes you the aggressor. It's a very interesting, it's a
quite a
turnaround.
paradigm shift.
So
It is.
I only have one question to those who would push that framing. Do you know you're doing that? Are you stupid or are you a liar? I hope you're a liar, because at least then you have a freaking brain in your head and you're just manipulative, you know?
And I think with the bringing it back in towards the NIC topic, I think it's a lot of column A and a little bit of column B, because the column A being clever, cunning, they know what they're doing.
That would be the liar category.
That would be. So I guess that probably was column B actually, but you get the idea. Not a lot of stupid people in so much as intelligence. Very intelligent people. They lack a lot of common sense. They lack wisdom. They lack ethics and morals, but they are not unintelligent.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sort of using
Arrogance is probably their biggest shortcoming.
and I'm sort of using it flippantly.
And no lack of it.
I don't mean like there actually are not very many like stupid people. Most people are not dumb. I'm using it flippantly, but I really just mean like, do you know what you're doing? Are you conscious of what it is that you're pushing? Do you know the framing you're engaging in? Do you believe your own bullcrap?
Back to the arrogance again.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would say then it's equal column A and column B. A lot of opportunism, especially around here, but well, everywhere. It extrapolates out.
I pulled there was a lot of audio from some of these board meetings because of course they're all recorded. I want to play this gentleman. You know, the public can of course get up to the podium there and make statements. This is from March 2022, so we're still firmly in the psychotic delusion times.
And some of these people got what I would call aggressive.
Yeah, well, then now this guy was not aggressive at all. He was actually very calm.
Oh, good.
Maybe you'll remember this, but I think it's worth playing what he had to say.
Mr. William Lee.
So the school is kind of like in this upheaval. There's all this drama that's happening.
Let me just describe William Lee. He's an Asian gentleman, looked like he was, I don't know, what is early 40s, late 30s, something like that. Just like a random member of the public?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's all this drama that's happening. The biggest feature of this is the accreditation agency threatening to take away the accreditation for the school. But the accreditation agency can only put their spotlight on a school when there is someone that reports or files a complaint. Who was the person that filed that complaint?
Now, because he's speaking so calmly, it's hard. You can get lost in, like, he's standing in a room full of people in 2022. Half of them are masked up. Half of the board members are masked up. It's been 2 years of freaking chaos. I mean, it's easy to sort of, now that we're years past it,
a lot of pressure if you weren't on the right side to stand up and speak publicly.
Exactly. So what he's doing, I mean, this guy's standing at a podium with one of those little mics on an arm, and it's very difficult to keep your voice from shaking. I mean, there's that famous the people fear public speaking more than, it's like the number one fear. Number two is death. So in other words, most people would rather die than speak publicly.
There was just one organization that did it. There were two complaints. When the first one didn't really garner the response that they wanted, they filed a second one. Would you be surprised if I told you that one of the trustees on this board is the president of that organization? That trustee is Christy Wood.
So just to clarify, let me make sure I understand what this guy's saying. He's saying that the only reason that the accreditation board even looked toward North Idaho College was because a complaint was filed.
That's correct.
And that complaint was filed by one of the other board members, this same lady.
The organization that she was in charge of. Yeah. Her and her cronies, although she used one of the cronies inside the organization to actually file it, Tony Stewart. And normally it's all about academics. Either they're there because academics are bad, or finances are bad. And usually accreditation gets involved when a school is going to shut down because they can't afford to keep going. They got to figure that out, or academics, which were neither of our two issues. In fact, we're accused of having too many financial reserves, and they made a point to try to keep lauding our academics to keep the liberal teachers happy and blame it all on the trustees. So academics are great, finances are great, and then they kind of tried to question that a little bit to point it on us with our bond rating and stuff, which was very disingenuous. So they're completely out of their lane on this thing, and now it's about governance. No college in the history of the country that we're aware of has ever lost their accreditation on a governance issue. And trust me, we've seen evidence, videos, stories of fights breaking out with trustees involved in fights in the middle of board meetings and other crazy stuff. I mean, some of these boards have gone nuts over the years, and no accreditation organization has ever taken away their accreditation, ever, for anything other than academics or financial. So this is groundbreaking. This is how far they had to reach to try to get something.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and William Lee brings it up in real time there, which was a magnificent moment.
Yeah, we're going to keep going here.
Full disclosure, he's a buddy of mine. I like him. He's a highly intelligent guy.
I want to be friends with him.
But she threatened, Christy Wood and her ilk threatened issues of this exact kind before
the election. Before the election in November of 2020, they said, if you don't vote right, we could lose accreditation. This was something they brought up before the election even happened.
It was a campaign issue.
This was a prophecy of theirs. This was a self-fulfilling prophecy where they threatened it, and then that was the tool that they already had in the toolbox and already had made that public, not without knowing a thing, without people being elected. Prior to the election, this was already one of the mantras that they were.
So that's really important to note, is that they were threatening the college having accreditation issues on the campaign trail. They knew what they were going to do.
Yeah, they started this whole thing to use it as a weapon. It's obvious.
Yeah, sort of like people living in the house, and the house is kind of dirty, and somebody wants to come, buys the house, comes in, wants to clean it up, and then they take a torch to the house and go, you did this. You did this to us. Like, we're going to burn this house down if you don't stop cleaning the house. And you go, well, no, I'm going to keep cleaning the house. And they light the house on fire and go, this is your fault. And that's precisely what Christy Wood and her organization
what
did.
I was describing earlier. COVID did it. So you torch your own laws and your own socioeconomic order, and then you say COVID did it.
Burn the house down.
You do it.
And you file the complaint against your own school that you're supposed to be supporting to try to use that to leverage it as a blackmail.
It's an Asian male that's speaking, not a black male, but let's continue.
There was just one organization that did it. There were two complaints. When the first one didn't really...
Oh, we heard that.
Trustee Christy Wood, we've seen through several meetings for the past 2 years, has tried to take the high road and behave as though she's altruistically seeking the best interest of the school, saying that the school is in crisis of leadership, whatever. And even going to the CDA press and sounding the alarm that the school's going to get in trouble. Yet her organization is the one sending the complaints to the accreditation agency.
You know what I should have done? I should have just spliced in after every sentence.
Whatever.
I wish I would have just kept going with that.
Whatever. If that sounds bonkers to you, it's because it is. There's like two things that this complaint accumulates to. It's that the board removed the mask mandates. The thing is, there was no state law that was mandating masks.
Mm-hmm. There wasn't anywhere.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this whole thing was fakery.
No, and in fact, the legislature had empowered the boards at the community colleges to have to say whether we were going to have them or not. And we exercised that authority properly and legally.
The thing is, there was no state law that was mandating masks. And according to Idaho statute, the board of trustees has full authority to do so. Lastly, it's kind of vague. It's that he's a big meanie and that he's a bully. That's kind of what the complaint amounts to.
Far-right bully.
But we have someone here who works part-time at the school who assaulted someone in public during one of these board of trustee meetings. She pushed her and then knocked down her sign. She literally assaulted her. And that person's name is Teresa Lohr. She's a part-time biology professor here.
Okay, now hold on. This is maybe my favorite part of this is because you're about to hear a little kerfuffle ensue. You kind of started to hear the voices.
Professor here.
Now that's when someone was like, "Oh, but you can't bring that up." And then who's the jamoke who gets on the video screen and has a little conniption?
Okay.
Is the board of trustees going to do anything about that?
I'm jumping in now.
We
do not attack personal people in public.
Personal. Okay, he means don't make personal attacks on people. So, you could try learning English if you want to jump in with your freaking pearls clutched. Who is this guy?
Okay.
Is the board of trustees.
Oh, and it's all just audio. No, but do you remember who it was? He was on a video screen. He wasn't even there. He was scared of the air, presumably.
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to hear the voice.
Okay.
Is the board of trustees going to do anything about that?
I'm jumping in now.
When you be done?
We do not attack personal people in public comment.
I'm not attacking that. It's a statement of facts.
I think you need to be done.
Yeah, thank you.
That was good. That was you, right? You need to be done. You've made your point. But I love that. Like, why is he not allowed to bring up? I don't understand.
Because
that.
one of their employees attacked somebody in the room.
Yeah.
Literally. And then, of course, they got interviewed. And when they got interviewed, they had to break down and da-da-da. And, of course, they got let off with nothing from the city of Coeur d'Alene again. But that was an assault. That was a battery. There was physical contact, the whole 9 yards. And, of course, her justification was that, it was deserved and justified. And, it was one of those things. It was funny. I saw the interview. I think I saw the Born Poll interview, too. I got to remember now. There's so much stuff now. And it's so hard. The memory banks get kind of full with all the nonsense.
So is this now I thought he said Teresa something else. Is this that same lady, the Teresa who's the professor there who got
that was Teresa Born-Poll.
That's what I thought you just said.
And then this was Teresa Lohr.
Okay, different lady.
Another special person. There's a lot of special people at NIC. Like Sarah Martin was the one that walked out crying after she was all tough and saying all this stuff. And then I just made a generic comment and she ended up crying and walking out. Well, she's now the head of the local Democratic Party.
Sure, perfect.
I mean, that makes sense.
It makes
she works
sense.
in this part of NIC. I think she's at the Workforce Training Center, if I remember correctly, which is a group of interesting folks.
This guy sounds like he's crying.
Okay.
Is the board of trustees going to do anything about that?
I'm jumping in now.
When you be done?
We do not attack personal people in public comment.
For one,
I'm trying to remember who that was.
The attack was the assault that William is describing.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're really worried about attacks,
which is on film.
Well, hey, we do not attack people unless you want to physically assault them, but we can't mention the assault. That's an attack.
That was during the meeting.
We should give credit, though, to William Lee.
His
response is on point. He goes, well, it's not an attack. It's just a statement of facts.
Yeah, I'm not attacking. I'm just telling you what happened. You're attacking me. Amazing.
So for some help with the chronology of this and where we're at, that was a meeting that got a little spicy. At this point, where is the board at in so much as Michael Barnes's aspect part of it? Because there's a chronological sequence of events where in 2020 they sweep, they get elected. Not that long after, there's the mask mandate vote. The board votes it down, and that makes waves.
It doesn't feel like it was a long time, but it was almost a year.
Right? It was.
Yeah.
Well, they make a thing of Michael's residency.
And then, I think this
Ken
comes
Howard.
next.
Ken Howard basically,
Ken Howard is another one of the trustees.
Trustees, but he'd been living in New Mexico. In fact, they had people looking into that, I think, and then apparently he had a mortgage in a house, and I don't know all the details. But he basically said, "Yeah, sue me. Come at me," because he's a lawyer and his son's in a firm and they're a big firm, so he could play this out forever about the residency. So he felt he was bulletproof. I think.
You're talking about Ken Howard.
Ken Howard, because they're accusing Michael Barnes of the same thing that we would probably say is probably true of Ken Howard. And Michael Barnes actually was renting a place.
And actually lived
And then Ken Howard has this property that's like half in Cooting County and half in Bonner County. And he has like this little structure built on it now. I don't know when he built it, but, so there's all these different things about residency, the kind of the pot calling the kettle black thing.
But this was the next leg in the whole
so
episode,
they
right?
So they threatened Michael with a lawsuit because they
accreditation.
love to use the law system. The judicial system is their friend.
Lawfare.
And the legal system, lawfare. So they threatened to sue Michael Barnes, this group, and some of the special people. Well, Michael's afraid fiscally that he'll get crushed because they keep naming us personally in all these lawsuits. So it's, in your official capacity and personally. So they're trying to tag us personally to hurt us. Well, they threatened to go after Michael about this residency thing. And of course, the college is hedging on whether he gets errors and omissions insurance and whether he's covered for a lawsuit as a trustee. They're putting the pressure on him. So he's feeling the pinch. They have some money. They sold their place and because they were renting in a different place now. They'd sold one of their residents. So I think Michael's feeling where he doesn't want to face this financially, so he just resigns.
It was a clever, cunning, calculated move, and they also again speaks to they knew what they were doing. They zeroed in on Michael Barnes. They knew they couldn't pull this stunt with Dad. They couldn't pull this stunt with McKinsey. Stronger personalities, that kind of thing. Michael Barnes was a bit of a gentler fellow, so they found their stuffed animal and they squeezed
the weak link.
I didn't want to call it that, but and they squeezed, and they didn't have to squeeze that hard, and that is
the white mushy stuff all came out.
That is where things really started to go off the rails. And that's how the accreditation stuff started to pop off, because with Michael Barnes, so I'm trying to build into this to help people understand the sequence of events. With Michael Barnes gone, now the board is locked in a 2-2.
And we couldn't appoint anybody because no one could agree on somebody.
No one could agree on anybody.
So then the accreditation, everybody got more excited. And then they cooked up this interesting interpretation of the statute that was not written well. And Christy Wood and Ken Howard resign. And then instead of appointing just one more new trustee to get us back to a quorum of 3, there was an interesting interpretation by the bureaucrats in Boise that the governor bought off on. And there's a whole story about the governor, and was he here, and when did he visit, and what was he involved with, and what meetings were held, and who knew what when, and what was done in advance. You can even talk about the hiring of Nick Swain about that too. There's some interesting oddities there. So they didn't appoint 1, they appoint 3. And then they took over the majority of the board. 3 unelected appointees to take over the majority of the board. Never had happened in the state of Idaho ever. Wow.
Brilliant maneuver, though.
In any circumstance. So they didn't just get one
to E4,
right? No, it was a brilliant maneuver.
Yeah.
So how?
Because if they appoint 1, that's 3. Then we appoint the next 2. No problem. But they knew we'd appoint people that hopefully were not wild cards on this thing and out there. So yeah, that was an interesting way. They overwhelmed the voters, will of the voters, took control of the board, seized that, got their president picked that they wanted, and there's this whole backstory to that deal, how that came to fruition. And then we had to hit the public vote again in 22. They thought they had that, squared away and going to move forward. And unfortunately for them, Mike Wagner got elected, and that gave us back the majority at 3-2.
Well,
then here we go again.
They were already starting.
We got a president we didn't want. Then I voted against twice.
The Save NIC / accreditation propaganda started sometime in mid 2022. So they started before that election, but they didn't have enough time, I guess. Now, by the time it got to 2024, it seems like they'd been hammering it now for, instead of a half a year, 2.5 years.
It was a well-oiled, well-funded machine,
and it worked. But this is the point of this show. This is what I want to do for North Idaho, is deconstruct the freaking billboards that you drive by and the social media posts that you scroll by and all of the sloganistic propaganda that requires deconstruction.
Yeah. So,
Save NIC. Well, now you're hearing what's behind all of it.
So here we are. It's 2020. We got a majority board, a majority conservative, right-wing contingency.
Far right.
Then they have the mask vote, makes waves. Then they focus in on Michael Barnes, push him out. Now it's a 2-2. Then the far left wing contingency. See, we can do that too.
Oh yeah.
They drop out. They resign and work the system to get 3 trustees appointed, not voted for, appointed by the.
They hate it when we vote. When we vote wrong, man, it bugs them.
So, and sometime around early or late 2021 is when the accreditation stuff starts to foment. But now that the board is 3-5 towards the left, it quiets down a little bit. Then 2022 comes along. Save NIC becomes a thing, but it hasn't found its feet. Wagner gets in. Conservatives have a 3-2 majority again.
The public voted wrong again.
And that's when Save NIC really grew. And that is when the movement really found its legs. And that's when the accreditation fight came front and center, because that was the place that the press and the cartel and everybody knew they could push. And it was a very easy point to push on the public who, let's be honest, they don't do their research. They Save NIC. That's all they know.
Save NIC. And
if you don't, we will lose accreditation. If we don't get rid of these guys, we will lose accreditation. Ironically enough, the complaints came from the left. They're burning down their own house in order to kick out the people they don't like.
Yeah, because they'll preside over ashes before they relinquish the reins.
Yeah. So that's where we are by 2022. And then the next 2 years are just all-out brawl, metaphorically, of course.
Well, I don't know. Is that true? Is it really?
New details on the former North Idaho College professor facing battery charges. Court documents reveal that this man, Zachary Schallbetter, threw a bucket full of water and cleaning chemicals at NIC trustee Todd Banducci. Police say the bucket hit Banducci, drenching him, his office desk, and items on his desk, including a computer. When police questioned Schallbetter about the incident, they said he told them he believes Banducci is to blame for all the problems at NIC, saying he feels as though Banducci caused people to lose their jobs and is hurting the community. Officer said Schallbetter found out he lost his job at NIC earlier that morning. He told officers he was being let go as a result of policies put in place by Banducci.
So that sounds like elements of an actual brawl.
Well, the irony is even the president came out and said that his termination had absolutely nothing to do with me. He was on a 1-year contract, and the 1-year contract ended. He said it had nothing to do with Trustee Banducci or the board.
So not only is he...
So they disavowed him. Because you break orthodoxy with them like this recent guy with Charlie Kirk. They will sacrifice some of their own if they absolutely have to, if they break orthodoxy or become a public embarrassment to keep the narrative. That's the one thing about the local special people is unlike the state and national level, they know just enough to not be too stupid because the people will turn on them so they know there's some boundaries that they can't exceed. So they have to keep themselves reined in and checked just enough to appear what they need to look like, to be acceptable. It's funny.
But the narrative has been pushed at this point. A lot of people believe that Todd Banducci, Greg McKenzie, a couple others are the root of all evil. And anything that's bad or wrong with NIC is thanks to them, to the point where this particular fellow, Schallbetter, just waltzes into Todd's office and just douses him.
Which, remembering, the board makes no decisions on personnel other than the president. That's the only one we have any input on is the president.
Not only
I'm pretty sure you fired him directly. I have it on good authority.
I'm by myself.
It's all you.
It was all me.
Not only is he an aggressive, abusive asshole, he's wrong. His premise was wrong.
Seriously, if you're going to be an aggressive, abusive asshole, at least have the decency to be correct.
Yeah, it's crazy. Which one is this one? Let's see.
Tonight, North Idaho College holding a special meeting the day after trustee Todd Banducci was allegedly attacked inside his office. Now we are learning
Just to be clear, allegedly, were you attacked?
He was arrested. He was put in jail. He's actually been arrested again because he was on a warrant. Here's another warrant out for him actually right now. He was found guilty. He was charged with fines. He was given time to clean up garbage on the side. He was put in the jail. I asked for a couple extra days there. The judge gave him 3 extra days actually in jail. He got quite the lecture from the judge, which is recorded, I understand, and
I wish I would have pulled that.
Was told to give some reimbursement to me. So yeah, he's got through it. The only thing that they did was interesting. Apparently, it depends on how the fines are done and how the charges are. Is they did let him plead the one down, so it's not actually a crime of violence. So they let him do like disturbing the peace and malicious destruction of property because originally, it was battery.
It's just a crime of passion now.
So they actually let him plea it down, which made a difference on the type of charge. So it's not technically a crime of violence anymore. So that changes things.
Okay.
But the short answer is yes, he did do it.
Well, just be clear,
physically
everyone, this talking head dumbass, he's an attorney.
Trustee Todd Banducci was allegedly attacked inside his office.
No, that was very real.
Yeah, right. I just want to be clear that it happened.
Now we are learning what exactly was inside the bucket that a former college employee is accused of dumping on him.
Hopes and dreams.
Good vibes.
Has more reaction tonight from Coeur d'Alene.
North Idaho College says the liquid in that bucket was a mixture of water and cleaning chemicals. Trustee Todd Banducci did not address the incident at tonight's meeting, but the college president did and called the behavior unacceptable. Zachary Schallbetter is the former North Idaho College assistant professor arrested this week. The college says he went to trustee Todd Banducci's private business, threatened him, then dumped a bucket of water and cleaning chemicals over his desk, soaking Banducci, his computer, and other office equipment.
I also want to point out that an incident like that, if you sort of don't think about it deeply, it's just like, well, an annoying incident that lasted 6 minutes. Your adrenaline can go for days from something like that. Not to mention, you got gals working in the office. That's an extremely unsettling event.
It's interesting because he damaged my stuff. There was equipment damage. My phone was ruined. Had to replace the phone. And you're right. Some of the younger, and particularly female employees, were very upset by that. And in fact, 2 of them wrote impact letters to the court. Yeah. 2 of the young ladies, they were allowed them to do it in a way that could be anonymous, but they did write impact letters about how workplace violence is not a trivial thing. And that really impacted people to have him come charging in there and do that. And to see us on the ground,
This is actually my favorite part, is the dude tries to flee. The old man calls up whatever left of his youth that he has.
Oh, tell me you clothesline the guy.
Chases the guy down.
Yeah. Well,
closes the gap.
He was in the doorway, and I didn't know if he had another weapon or anything else.
That's the other thing. You don't know. He's going to pull
He's doing this, and he's got me, and my glasses flew off. I had my reading glass on, and I'm soaking wet. I stand up at my desk.
Behind his desk.
I'm behind my desk. He's in my office, right at the corner. But the Charlie Kirk thing now, people have asked, what if he'd had a gun? What if he'd have come in there? Would you be dead? Would he be dead? Would you have had to, what would have happened if he'd done more than just a bucket of...
No kidding.
But he was a leftist, so he didn't believe in guns.
So,
natural.
But at that point, he's in my doorway, and I don't know, but I see his hands. And I'm a trained military man. So I go leaping over the desk and hit him as he's in the doorway and drive him down onto the carpet, onto the ground, and I'm on top of him. I had him pinned to the ground.
WWE Raw style.
So, I'm holding him until some other men came from the office, and they, one of the guys taps me on the shoulder and says, okay, Todd, we got this. And so the three of them have him down, and I get off, and then, law enforcement people are calling and everything. They end up showing up and arresting him. And
this is all allegedly, of course. Allegedly.
And then the guy says, well, we didn't witness it. So are you going to do a citizen's arrest? I said, yeah, okay, fine. I do a citizen's arrest. So then they would actually handcuff him and take him out, because I had to make the citizen's arrest.
It was like a technicality?
Because
that part blows my mind, because how often do the cops not witness things and arrest you anyway?
And of course, there's everybody there.
How does that work?
But yeah, because they didn't actually witness the assault.
What, like...
they weren't going to arrest him, even though everybody there, and I'm soaking wet, and there's the bucket, and my office is destroyed. And
you brought up Fight Club earlier. I mean, there's that scene where he kicks his own ass. Maybe you threw water on yourself. What do they know?
It's that bucket challenge thing. Yeah, that's what I was doing.
I won the game. I doused myself.
Yeah.
Let's just finish this nonsense.
Earlier today, Schallbetter agreed to speak with Krem 2, then changed his mind and said he would send a statement instead. As of late tonight, we haven't received one.
Let me be clear. Violence and physical intimidation are simply not okay.
Now, this is the president speaking at the board meeting,
right?
This
is the code for it's okay unless it's Todd, but hey, it's okay.
Yeah, totally. Like we condemn Todd. I mean, we condemn the. Wait, what are we saying?
Are simply not okay. Not on this campus and or in any setting.
Unless it's against Todd Banducci.
And North Idaho College has zero tolerance for violence. Period.
2% tolerance if it's against Todd.
During tonight's special meeting, President Nick Swain reiterated the fact that Schallbetter was on a one-year contract teaching web and graphic design. That contract ended last week. Schallbetter was arrested Wednesday and posted bond. He only spent a few hours in jail. He's facing charges of battery and malicious injury to property. He made his first court appearance this morning.
And we were able to chat with Trustee Banducci after the meeting outside and off camera. He told us that he's okay, just a little shaken up by everything, and so are a lot of the women in his office. He's just glad that nothing more violent occurred. Reporting from North Idaho College tonight, Kyle Simchuk, KREM 2 News.
And you don't know in the moment that nothing more violent is going to occur. I mean, what if the guy pulls a machete?
Well, you don't. And as it ended up with our little wrestling match, as it turned out, I'm bleeding from my I was in some shorts that day. So my knees are bleeding, my elbows are bleeding, my arms are bleeding. And so they took pictures and everything, and they actually insisted that I go get medically evaluated. So I went to the VA clinic, and then they sent me over to Northwest Specialty Hospital, make sure everything was recorded and everything. And it was kind of hard too, even driving over to the hospital, and I'm on the phone with my wife, and she kind of asked me how I was doing. And then she asked me a question that created a little bit of a reaction from me while I was driving. It rekindled a couple things for a moment. So yeah, it doesn't just last for the 6 minutes, as you said. And it was something that, and then through the court system and the trials and all the different things.
Okay, so let's move along on the timeline here. So now you still have, we're like, November 2022. Now we're into 2023. We still have like a full almost 2 years left here. So describe 2023 and 2024 as they've really ramped up. I mean, it's hard to describe. Like you, as dwellers in this county, like you couldn't not see their propaganda. Excuse me.
Did not see that coming.
Yeah. Like everywhere you went, there was every magazine you flipped open, every billboard. Like they blanketed that Save NIC propaganda, and you lived through it as the quote center of this eye of the hurricane.
Well, I stepped down. We let Greg was the chairman for a year, and then Mike was the chairman for a year, which was fine. I just tried to help them and assist them, try to be a good wingman. We got stuck with Nick Swain, who I don't think was qualified. And there was
Nick Swain as president.
Yeah, and I don't think he was hired in the proper manner. I think there were some irregularities in how he was hired, and maybe even been some things that were done that were inappropriate or otherwise even more.
Well, the interview process even.
Yeah, the interview process.
The interview process did not include all of the
trustees, and we didn't do the normal process. Everything about his deal was wrong, and as compared to the normal way we'd done it.
It was sort of like the midnight judges type things.
And I'd been there through a prior hiring, so I'd seen it. It was quite the jerry-rigged deal, I think.
They did interviews when certain right-wing
like I was going to be gone
trustees
for a couple of them doing military duty, and they were trying to schedule. They didn't coordinate. And then they held them at the Hayden Lake Country Club where it was private. You're supposed to be public. We're supposed to notice those. We normally would meet in just a public restaurant. That's how we did it the time before when we interviewed everybody. So, Chairman Wold's trying to like sequester somebody and do his own. It was just totally bizarre. Everything about it was wrong. He was wrong, and he should never have been our president. And so we tried to replace him with Greg South, who was way more qualified. He brought in a great team, which these guys never had, and they'll never have it again. So it was really interesting as we were working through that process. And then that was just a total fight, and we ended up in the court system. And at the end of the day...
So now there's a legal battle, too, at this time.
Well, Nick Swain sued the trustees at least twice.
Yeah. Because if you love an institution, the best thing to do is to set it on fire.
Lawsuits, yeah.
So anyway, that was a lot of that fight and the accreditation fight, and that consumed the last 2 years. And eventually, Nick Swain ended up being the president. Greg South moved on, and in fact, he's doing tremendously well, landed on his feet. And for anybody that's listening that wants to know, Mike Sabali has landed on his feet and is doing great too.
Mike Sabali was another
interim president briefly,
who got a really bad shake. He was
the president when we got rid of McLennan. We brought in, and he got subverted by his own staff and people, which was unfortunate. Senior leadership cut his legs out underneath him too. He was a great guy. And then people tried to hurt him, and then they end up trying to create some baloney on him, and anyway, he ended up having to leave, left the college.
You're noticing a trend.
Moved to Nebraska, where they tried to ruin him and his wife and all their children. And so he went out there, and now he's taken another position and moved and doing fantastic. So, but yeah, they try to ruin your life too. It's not like we don't want you to hear. We want to hurt your family. We want to ruin your life. We want to fire you. We want to create stuff to make you look like you're bad.
Come after your kids. Come after your kids' business.
Yeah, well, all of that stuff acts as it's an effective deterrent if any one of you far rightists wants to try to make chaos again. You see what happens.
They do. They want to grind you under their boot. I'll tell you.
So basically, to recap for the old man here, 23 and 24 were mired in just small issue after big issue after small issue, a lot of lawfare, lawsuits, more threats about losing accreditation. So they hung the accreditation issue over
everything. So we just kind of just moved laterally for 2 years.
It just hung over everything the whole way.
For 2 years.
And Save NIC did that intentionally, and older people did that intentionally.
Push into the next election.
So then with the 2024 election, the establishment got what they wanted. They swept.
And they did. They had all their chips in the middle. If they had lost in 24, the college would have had a much brighter future.
What's really interesting, though,
because it was really right there
with the
one way or the other.
For the state reps and state senators, the more conservative side of the spectrum actually did very, very well in North Idaho.
I know, and I was so surprised to see that result. Yeah. I was very disappointed. I thought North Idaho had figured it out.
Well,
apparently not.
One of the theories is that they, speaking of pushing all their chips into the middle, they went so hard on NIC that they actually
at the exclusion
of some of the other elections.
And they've done that before, where they've excluded and not even supported some of their own people, but they're really focused. NIC was their power center, too.
It was there.
Downtown, education. Yeah. If you're a liberal, Democrat, rhino, establishment person, that's where your money comes and goes right there. Even the library was very secondary to that. All the fight over the library was very secondary compared to the college stuff.
There's a lot of legal money laundering that goes on down there.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just
allegedly.
It's what resonates with them. Education. That's their bastion.
Education in quotes.
Yeah. I mean, that's their world.
Indoctrination.
We were in their territory.
Yeah, no, they couldn't have it, and it was especially frustrating to see.
And the resources they threw at it. Oh my gosh!
Well, that's it, because like you're saying, they really went all in. That was clearly they focused almost all their propaganda efforts on that that item.
Slate of candidates, how they did it, and unfortunately, they scared so many people off that Greg McKenzie, I think, probably would not have run had we been able to. Another candidate had stepped forward, but there was a dearth of candidates, particularly from his zone. So Greg ran again, where we had two new candidates. I think we might have seen a different outcome. They used Greg as the anchor against that. He was up against probably the strongest of their candidates, the car dealer, and they linked Greg to the prior problems and to me, and that was the thing. Because if you look at like Michael Angioletto was pretty close. The other gentleman, Post Falls, was a little further, but the biggest gap was that race. And I think had it been a clean slate against a clean slate, we might have had a different result. So that was unfortunate, but that's their effectiveness in scaring away candidates.
Yeah. If we had all day, which we don't, because we're, at least for you, coming to a close, but there's dozens more examples and stories of. I think the Widmeyer property is a very good example of how things operate down there.
Piece of junk building that's
where
not being used.
The board, when the left side, when they have the majority, they take care of one of their own, Steve Widmeyer, who used to be mayor of Coeur d'Alene, and had a business down there on school grounds, the Fort Ground Grill. And
adjacent to school
when
grounds.
Push came to shove, the school wanted to buy it from him for interesting reasons, and he made out like a bandit on it. It was $1 million plus that the school paid him for this property that was worth maybe half that.
Well, we'd had an old.
They didn't need it, but
several months
Steve needed
old
an exit.
appraisal. We were going into the winter,
and they're all buddies.
You want to
They're all
kind of
friends.
run it part time and try to squeeze out. And then we gave them a rent that was like $5. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but rent was so low that people called that it wasn't even a market rent. So eventually that contract got ended, and then finally they got done. And then the stuff that was of value in the building he took anyway.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting way that all went down.
That's the norm down there.
Let's hear an example of some of that propaganda that was running up to the 2024 election.
November 5th, Kootenai County will go to the polls to vote on the future of North Idaho College. It is time to elect NIC trustees who will protect and defend our community college and ensure that NIC remains accredited as low-cost, high-value education. Durbin, Knudsen, and Havercroft are candidates that you can be proud to vote for. They love this community and want to see the college and students thrive on November 5th. Please support Durbin, Knudsen, and Havercroft for trustees, paid for by Save NIC Now.
Mm-hmm. So even the name of and it's now this video is branded on both sides with this logo, Save NIC Now, and that was the whole framing. It's like
went from Save NIC to Save NIC Now. God.
Now,
right
it's
now,
emergency.
Oh.
An emergency they love emergency declarations, don't they?
They do.
I was looking for a news. I should have pulled one like a news report from after the election. I wanted to kind of hear how they covered.
Oh, suddenly they're praising the voters. The voters were smart. They saved NIC, and gosh, they made a great choice. And wow, they're all about it. Where before, and you still watch this even nationally, statewide. Every time it doesn't go the right, the voters are stupid. They did it wrong. They don't get it.
Wrong.
They don't understand. Right. If only you understood. If only we could, educate you, because you're. It's funny how that works. If you vote the way they want, you're great. If you don't, then obviously you're the problem. It's the voters that are the problem, not their message or what they do, or it's the voters' fault.
Unless we vote correctly.
And
then we're geniuses who saved North Idaho College.
Oh yeah, I mean the community just stepped up and really figure. But yet you still have 45 to 50% in each of those races, or somewhere in that range, of people that still saw the light. So you won, but not exactly what you call a landslide.
And that was those who cut through the rhetoric.
Yeah,
I mean, and the rhetoric was deep. In fact, I had personal acquaintances who reached out to me for clarification on my dad and the other trustees and that particular race. And these are people who know me personally, know me well, and know my politics.
They sowed a lot of confusion.
And when I've got them reaching out to me for clarification, that's when I knew.
Heavy propaganda campaign.
And sample ballots out everywhere, and recommended candidates, and multiple groups using the terms North Idaho or Republican or all the above and everything. I mean, they mimicked to match other organizations. You got the official KCRCC, Kootenai County Republican Central Committee saying stuff, and you got groups that are copying what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like North Idaho Republicans.
Yeah, they mimic the branding. It's deceptive.
Of course, they got in trouble. They got fined, and then they got told not cease and desist. Don't use this and that logo. I mean, they're on over the line all the time. And then
there's no tactics that are off limits. This is a Linskyite-ism.
It's absolutely there's the rules for radicals.
There's no rules.
There's no rules.
And like even the caption for that video I just played that Save North Idaho College Now. Kootenai County voters have 3 strong, no-nonsense, conservative-minded candidates for North Idaho College Board.
Boy, is the word conservative overused and misused anymore.
Well,
and everybody seems to be a Christian too. Our central committee, I just want to know the theology in their church. That's all. I wonder. It's amazing, the Christians and what they do.
Commandment number 1: Thou shalt win at all costs.
Yeah, he's right.
Well, that's true though. They do believe that any means are okay if it justifies the ends. Yep. And they've said it. I've even had friends. I mean, Mary Susan even once said, someone called her on, she said some stuff, and she tried to deny him. And finally she admitted, well, yeah. And then basically her comment was, well, it's just politics. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. I don't care. What you say here, I'm going to hold you accountable here. You don't get a free pass to say stuff. No. If you say stuff that's wrong or incorrect or untrue or whatever, you can't just say crap and then after we're done, we'll hug and shake hands and everything's okay. No, you got to conduct yourself pre-election and post-election the same way.
Whoa, holding people accountable is not cool, Dad.
I know.
Not cool.
So what is the status of the accreditation now?
It's being returned slowly, and they're making the proper, But it was looking good, and they're slowly, incrementally doing this because now they've got control. So they're just going to take their time, play it out, and do it right.
Make it look like it was hard to get back.
Oh yeah. But the college is kind of
right. They can't just go like, okay, well that's over. It's all good.
Right.
The college
they know they can't, but they could. They literally could if they wanted to. Just be like,
nobody goes to the meetings. A couple people went a couple times.
You get it back now.
Nobody talks. Hardly anybody shows up. It's just totally opaque. Nick Swain runs the college, and he's got 5 yes votes for everything he wants.
Yep.
And
they have the full majority.
They're just rubber stampers,
and they're all happy. So there's no protest, nobody pulling fire alarms.
It's total cool.
Nobody assaulting my dad.
They're just having a great time.
I kind of miss the excitement a little bit.
Well, a couple of my friends still kept going. A couple of minutes going, and then they said,
"What's the point?"
What's the point? It's just boring. It's like a joke. It's like Nick's in charge. Okay, everybody's good.
Well, I think at a certain point, and for you, it's been 12 years worth. Where you're back to the way it was 12 years ago.
After 12 years,
we
end up making
it
no
looks
ground.
The same. Yeah, we're back except more people now hate more people.
In fact, ironically, we're in the same athletic league. Although they killed, that was a retaliation, I think, when they killed the golf program.
Oh, that was
the
like
golf
day
coaches.
one.
The golf coaches were the golf program was the best program we had. They won all the championships. The golf coach Russell was amazing. Of course, Eastern Washington just hired him, so better for him. He's now at the 4-year institution, making more money, better deal, higher college. But he bucked the system a little bit, and his dad did as the assistant coach. And I advocated for them because they needed an assistant coach. They only had one paid coach. That's it for a men's and a women's team. And they were one of the ones, and so they're one of the first ones that got chopped. So I like the Italian program. When Tony said something, they had the gall to actually say something. And I'm going to tell you, I'm surprised, I shouldn't probably say this public, but they'd probably whack Corey Simmons if it wasn't for all the connections with his family. He hadn't been there for so long in the community. Because, Corey's one of the few that at times is kind of chafed too. But there's something on the recording of when the other head coaches, when some of this went down and when they fired the golf team, there's stuff out there, but nobody can say anything because they have jobs and careers, right. So golf was one. And that's the thing that's so funny is the golf community screamed and yelled, and they gave no attempt to left them even fundraise. They'd raised so much money in just like this. They'd raise money because the golf courses support them, and they loved Russell Grove, and all the connections. It's too expensive. We can't do it. Okay. Would you let them fundraise or come to the Booster Club? No. They're gone.
Also, everybody got a 3% pay raise.
Right. Exactly right. So
and we're spending money on other things too. I can keep going on that one.
And the president makes like $350,000, not including perks.
It's also it's punitive, and it happens again at every level where they're like, you didn't give us what we wanted financially for like administrator salaries. We're cutting the kids' art program. What do you think about that?
It was the make believe budgets.
That is the modus operandi. In fact, you see it with the government shutdowns now. You know what they close? They close the forward facing stuff that you and I need to get shit done.
And art
but they still take our tax money, so they're not closed.
That's like the athletic thing. We went back to the new athletics, and we had this budget. We had this understanding with the coaches. We never made it through the first year, so we could get a baseline to see what we were actually spending. They got all these numbers out, which were the budget or the projected. Which even at Sarah, when I put her on the spot, said, "Well, these are the worst case scenarios. These are the highest possible things. We've created everybody like they're from a foreign country, and all this stuff." There weren't real numbers, but they're the ones they're clinging to and the ones they keep using. And it's just staggering to me. And so we'll have never seen real numbers or know what it actually costs for 1 year back in the original athletic program.
For 1 year of what?
Back in the original conferences.
Oh, okay.
Back in the NJCA. We never actually got a full year of that to see it. We wanted to see 1 year, and then we figured out, the coaches were known not to abuse it because that would create all sorts of problems. But hey, we couldn't even get there.
But staff and faculty got another raise.
Yes, so the cost of living.
I don't think there's been a year or 2 year period where they haven't gotten at least a 2 or 3% raise.
Well, we displaced those student athletes.
Yeah,
they can be sacrificed.
Well,
they're just the students. They're just the kids. Yeah. This college is not about the students and the kids. Exactly. It's not.
It's a jobs program, but for the people who already have jobs.
Career job program.
That's the part that gets lost in all of this. Like they're just pawns. Like they're not even real. None of it's real.
You mean it was about the students? I spent 12 years just going, really? You gotta be kidding me. I had said once in the military, I've had enough salutes. I don't need any more. It wasn't about power or ego with her. I went back because I was asked by a 96 grad that took over as the commander of the wing over there, and he needed help. So I went and helped for as long as I could stand it, especially under the Biden administration and COVID and everything else. It was miserable. But I enjoyed it. I loved my brothers and sisters in the military, and actually I loved serving. And I was proud to do it. But it was tough at times, like I said. But again, I don't need anything. This hurt my life. This hurt my business. This hurt everything. Please, someone tell me what I got out of this somehow, financially or anything else.
There was a lot of that, actually. There were a lot of accusations
I was a private land investor,
we knew
developer,
or that we were developers, and we wanted to tank NIC.
Oh my God.
Accuse your opponents of that which you are guilty.
Wild stuff,
my gosh.
man. That we wanted to tank NIC as a family, so then we could somehow get our hands on the property and demo it,
which was set up by when it was originally deeded. They can only be used for 3 purposes. It could never happen anyway.
Meanwhile, him and I, we don't have anybody who we're related to or who were that are in the real estate industry.
But some of the people against us are. Developers and builders and all the rest of that.
Counterpoint: imagine how cool a cigar lounge on the Spokane riverfront would be.
It would be pretty sweet, but I wouldn't be able to afford the property taxes.
Forgot.
Yeah, I still forget all the benefits I got out of this.
Well, yeah, it's an unpaid position.
Unpaid.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I did it too for all the power and authority because I'd never had any power or authority or been in charge.
Oh, yeah, wielding that must have been a rush.
Well, I'll tell you, I just was beside myself, excited and giddy.
So here's a question then. If you could go back to 2012, knowing what you know now, would you even wade into the pool?
Ooh. It's a hard question to answer. Here's what I will say. And I will say this at least about Dunlap and McLennan to a degree, especially Dunlap, but McLennan even to a point. It wasn't an ability for me to work with some of the senior staff there, some of the leaders. And I did have some friendships and some relationships there, some better than others, some not so much. But I could work with people. I could work with a Lita Burns or Graydon Stanley, or, I certainly worked with Chris Martin enough, budget stuff, fiduciary by trade and practice. That's what I do. And there were times where I could go to those folks, hand stuff off to them, and they could help students, parent concerns, student concerns, issues. And a lot of times I didn't even know until unless people came back to me. There was limits of what they could tell me, but they could always at least tell me we got to the right person, or we handled it, or we took care of it, or we were able to help those people, even if there weren't a lot of specifics sometimes just because of privacy or whatever. But I knew those, and I knew a lot of times they were engaged because, again, those people would come back to me and even thank me. So we had a lot of small victories, and we made a difference in the trajectory and the careers of some people and in their lives. And I know sometimes we were able to have actually dramatic impacts by making some change, affecting how things were handled, and decisions and stuff that were the right things to do. But again, I was already removed out of that process, but the senior leadership took that upon themselves in their chain of command and did what they needed to do to help those students and did right by those students. And that was what it was all about. So for me, those victories, I feel that they were worth it for those people because I know we made a difference in people's lives. And so I took a lot of solace, and what kept me going were those little victories like that where I know we helped people in the one-on-one situations. The college as a whole, there were some instructors, one of the college professors that was always under fire was Ed Cates. Dr. Cates, brilliant man. I highly respect him. But they were after him. But we were able to make it so that when he decided to leave the college, he left under his own terms, and now he's become the headmaster out at the Kootenai Classical Academy, and he's doing an amazing job, and that school's doing an amazing job, and they have a huge waiting list.
I know. I've heard good things, and I got a 1.5-year-old, or almost 2, and I have heard the waiting list is a long one.
But, he's a guy that maybe if I wasn't trustee, maybe his tenure wouldn't have lasted as long there, because they were certainly targeting him, but I think they also knew that I was watching that. So maybe I helped Dr. Cates. I don't know. I don't want to oversell it or make too big a deal of it, but just some examples of kids, and that one I'll throw out. The kids, I won't mention any names, but my son actually knows at least one young man that he knows his dad very well, and that we were able to help with on the CTE side of it.
Yeah, Dad definitely moved the needle on an individual level for sure.
So
for sure,
I'm going to try to go with that answer that we made some differences. So hopefully, it was all worth it.
But would you do it again? Would you jump in?
Honestly, I don't know if I would or not. The toll it took on my family, my friends and family, and my business, and just everything, and on me, quite frankly.
So that's cool. So that's just the reaction you want from people who are trying to volunteer in their community. So that's well done. Well done, Coeur d'Alene Cartel. You've done a yeoman's job.
0 stars. Would not recommend volunteering.
So I think we can, even though I'm sure there's tons of stones we left uncovered, I think that's a pretty good dive and a different perspective than the one you saw on the billboard. Save NIC. Hopefully,
it's saved.
Hopefully it's been saved.
As evidenced by the recent instructor and his thing and all the other good stuff that's coming.
I think the golf program feels pretty saved.
Yeah, it went the way of the baseball and other things.
Okay, so I think that we'll wrap that up. Thank you very much for joining us, Todd. I appreciate it a lot. And I think you make me a little levity as we wrap up our inaugural show here on No ID. We have this from just this week that Fish and Game has been pulling on us.
Hunters in North Idaho, take a second look before you pull that trigger. That trophy bull standing oh so still might not be what you might think. Fish and Game officers are deploying lifelike decoys called artificial simulated animals to catch hunters breaking the law. These realistic models of moose, elk, and deer are used to stop illegal road hunting, spotlighting, and trespassing. Anyone caught shooting one of these...
By the way, you can tell this guy went to broadcast school.
Is this guy's accent legit? You're breaking the law.
His accent is, I went to the Columbia School of Broadcasting.
Anyone caught shooting one of these decoys could lose their license, face up to a $1,000 fine, and even spend 6 months behind bars.
Oh, come on.
Spend 6 months behind bars. So before you take a shot, make sure your bull's the real deal and not a setup.
Quagmire. This guy's Quagmire from Family Guy.
It's funny because there was an article in the newspaper about that, and here's the other deal. After all of that, they can charge you an extra $50 for the damage you did to the decoy because they got to repair the decoy after you shoot it.
And it's a high quality decoy. I mean, you see how detailed this thing is?
Well, they can move.
It's incredible.
It's audio animatronics.
I thought I heard artificial insemination is what I first thought I heard. Speaking of Quagmire.
So just in case you were planning on doing some poaching here in North Idaho, Fish and Game, they might be setting you up, just so you know.
We're going to put all the new thousands of acres that the tribe just bought back and just closed all the hunters. So probably set one right on there.
In the words of the great Admiral Akbar, it's a trap.
It's a trap.
Okay, well, let's wrap up our inaugural show.
Did we get through most of the clips that you wanted?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I went way long.
No, that's
Boys,
just fine.
We have 15 minutes for a beer if we can get
Let's
there.
do it. Yeah. Thank you very much for checking out our
I'm going to be scrambling like a wild man.
Thanks,
our
Pops.
first episode of No ID. I'm Scott. That's Paul. Todd joined us. And if you found value in this show, please send it back to us. Time, talent, or treasure. noidpod@gmail.com. noidshow.com. And hopefully we'll see you for the next one.
Cheers.
behind bars.